Okay. Record. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting, in accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act, has been given by placing notice of this meeting on the first floor of the municipal building, by sending a copy to the newspaper designated by the township for such notices, and also by posting it on a copy of the agenda and the meeting notice on the municipal website. We are being broadcast live on Channel 34, and we are streamed live and will be available on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and to draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to that which the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. The first item on our agenda this evening is our roll call. I'm here.
Vice Chair Brodock is excused. Mr. Graham?
Here.
Mr. Inwali?
Here.
Ms. Lockman?
Here.
Mr. Ortiz?
Here.
Mr. Pierre?
Present.
Ms. Willis? Here. Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
And Mr. Neiman is excused.
Okay, we have minutes from our July 24th meeting.
I received some changes to the minutes from Ms. Lockman. I just want to point out that on page 2, the fifth paragraph, the distance between the deck and the parking, it's 10 feet.
Yeah, I screwed up.
So that should be 10 feet and not 7.4.
Sorry, I was going to send another revised version, but I said we can talk about it here, so,
That's fine.
yep.
Were you planning on jumping that distance, by the way?
Yes, I will.
Just going to test to make sure it can.
In my wild youth, I would have.
Parkour is making a comeback.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I move.
Is there a second? Mr. Graham?
Second.
Is that you? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
We have the resolution for 499 Bloomfield Avenue.
Are there any changes to the resolution? Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Motion. Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
I think Ms. Willis also abstained from the minutes. That's not what we saw.
Okay. Got that. Yes, I see.
So next up is the application for,
I have one item for old business. I'm wondering if you've heard at all from Paul Burr on the indemnification request?
I haven't heard anything from
No?
the council or the township attorney on the indemnification request.
Okay, thank you.
And let the record show that Mr. Giosa is here.
any other old business matters? All right. And that takes us to our new business, again, Preservation Partners LLC, 38 North Willow Street.
Should we make an announcement about Lackawanna? We're not gonna, it's gonna go to the subcommittee.
That's next on the agenda.
Yeah, but this application, you have to get through it first.
Well, Chair Nguyen, I think there's a lot of people here. There might be some people here for the Lackawanna Plaza redevelopment plan. Is the board going to discuss that tonight?
Sorry. This is something that we won't be discussing tonight. It's just coming before us so that we can initiate the discussions that we will have.
Okay, perhaps we can make an announcement that it's on the agenda as part of the council referral, because I think there's people here in the audience for Lackawanna Plaza.
Well, I think you just did.
Okay.
You just made the announcement. And for those who didn't hear, we're not going to be discussing the Lackawanna Plaza redevelopment this evening. It's on the agenda merely because it's being referred to us. The revision is being referred to us by the council. And we will receive it this evening. We will review it, and then we will be discussing it at a next meeting. Janice?
Yeah, the next meeting, I think we have a redevelopment subcommittee that will, between now and the next meeting, review the changes and make a report to the planning board. The next meeting is September 11th, so the planning board will have to take action
Right.
September 11th, because the report's due September 29th.
And that's when we'll be discussing it. And again, we won't be approving or rejecting it. We will be basically making a recommendation to the council as to whether or not it conforms with the master plan. And we will make any additional comments that we feel appropriate. But the actual hearing on the plan will take place before the council once we send it back to them. So with that, those of you who are interested in our discussion, it'll be at that next meeting. So if you were hanging around for that, now's your opportunity to regain your evening. So,
What is the date the council is going to vote on?
I don't think we know yet.
What's the vote coming up?
I believe it'll probably be the October, since, depending on when, if the planning board sends the report after the September 11th meeting, there might not be enough time for them to put the public hearing for the second meeting in September, so it might be the first meeting in October, but I'm not positive.
So that's the range.
And just to confirm, the subcommittee has to have the report to this board by September 11th.
Should it be in advance of?
In
for-
advance of, because
And,
it
well, what date are you looking for?
Yeah.
right, so that the planning board can talk about it and make comment and.
As far enough in advance of the meeting
As
as
we
you
can.
can.
Okay.
It depends on, I guess it depends on how much you have to say. But, enough time so that we can read it and we can have a discussion about it at the meeting.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Yeah, the planning board only has one meeting in September, which is September 11th, so.
And it's,
All right?
well, if we wanted to move the 11th, if we wanted to kick the 11th by a week in order to give, because if we only have one meeting in September, is it possible to do that? Because I have an ulterior motive. I've got an appellate argument
I
in
believe that
California
there's a
that day.
holiday issue with the Mondays in September, which is why we only have
But
that one meeting.
Rosh Hashanah is over on Sunday, I think.
Okay.
I don't mean to force my problems on anybody else, but it might dovetail nicely with the fact that the subcommittee needs more time, and if we're only having one meeting, if we want to try to make it the 18th, it might make sense, and I can be there, but don't do it for me, do it for you.
Can I attend from Lake Como in Italy?
We'll do Zoom again?
TC.
I have no response
I'm
to
actually-
that. I'm gonna turn to my betters for the response to that one.
I mean, I think it's a good idea to have as many people as possible here.
I actually am not sure I can make the 11th either, so that would be my preference as well.
And I don't have a preference one way or the other, so. Is it feasible?
Oh, we can change it to the 18th, because I don't see any issues on my calendar. If it doesn't conflict with Rosh Hashanah.
Let me triple check, but I looked. Let me triple check. I looked yesterday, and I believe Rosh Hashanah starts Friday evening, and even for 2 days ends Sunday. But give me half a second, and I'll confirm. Ends at sundown on September 17th, so the 18th is good.
So you want to have two meetings, you meet the 11th and the 18th, or just reschedule the 11th to the 18th?
Reschedule the 11th.
Reschedule the 11th to the 18th.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I will take care of that.
I thank everybody for their flexibility.
Okay, so then that discussion will take place on the 18th.
Okay.
All right? All right, Mr. Tremula.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Tremulak appearing this evening on behalf of the applicant, Preservation Partners LLC. This is an application for site plan review and a parking variance triggered by a proposed change in the use of the property located at 3A North Willow Street, which is block 3206, lot 3.01. Properties located in the C1 Central Business District. Although we filed the application in the name of the property owner, the real party in interest here is Jazz House Kids, who I'm sure all of you are familiar with. Jazz House Kids being, I think, one of Montclair's most prominent, most visible nonprofit 501c3 organizations, which, among many other things that they do, is the host of the annual Montclair Jazz Festival, which has already commenced activities for this year with a block party about 2 weeks ago at Lackawanna Plaza. Jazz House Kids currently occupies space in 2 buildings located at 347, and I believe the adjacent building is 359 Bloomfield Avenue. These buildings are pretty much directly adjacent to the building at 3A North Willow Street, to which they would like to expand their operations into. All 3 of these buildings, as well as I believe 4 or 5 other properties in the immediate vicinity of this building on Bloomfield Avenue and North Willow Street, are owned by various limited liability companies, all of which are owned or controlled by Stephen Plofker, which is important because of the shared parking that takes place among these properties and the ability to control the parking. In 2020, we appeared before the zoning board for this property because we needed a use variance in order to use the first floor of the property as office space, which is not permitted in the central business district. So we needed a use variance. Then we received the use variance as well as site plan approval from the zoning board to utilize the entire building as office space. It's about 7,500, 7,700 total square feet. It's not a large building. Building renovations approved by the zoning board have been underway and are getting fairly close to completion. And we're here tonight because Jazz House Kids and the property owner, Preservation Partners LLC, have an agreement for Jazz House Kids to occupy the entire building at 3A North Willow Street and to use a portion of the building as performance space in addition to portion of the building used for the previously approved office use. The change in use from 100% office to a mixed use consisting of office space and performance space triggers a small increase in the parking demand for the building, which is why we're here this evening. That change in use triggering a higher parking demand also triggers site plan review. Now, in terms of site plan review, we are not proposing any changes whatsoever in the site plan that was approved by the zoning board 3 years ago. The only change is the use of the building, the interior configuration, and the mixed use between office and performance space. I need to point out that there's a fairly important clerical error in the revised plans that were submitted to the board. When we filed this application, the original plans called for approximately 3,163 square feet of office space and 4,364 square feet of instructional and performance space. However, following the submission of the original application, the original plans, because this was a developing project for Jazz House Kids, and due to certain program changes that Jazz House Kids wanted to make, the plans were revised, and revised plans were submitted, which reduced the performance space from 4,364 to 2,888 square feet. Now, the original intention was to use that space on the first floor as instructional and performance space. When the plans were changed, the intention was to convert that space to be used exclusively as performance space. Unfortunately, in our haste to get the revised plans submitted, there was a clerical error, so the revised plans still referred to the 2,888 square feet on the first floor as instructional and performance use. I want to make it clear, and the testimony will indicate that there's no intention to provide any instructional uses in this building or any classroom space, that there'll be 2 floors of office space, and the first floor would be a performance space, for performances organized, operated, sponsored by Jazz House Kids. As I said, there's no intention to have any classrooms or instructional space. Those activities currently take place in the 2 other buildings on Bloomfield Avenue that Jazz House Kids has occupied for, I believe, about 10 years.
Correct.
And there'll be no change in how those buildings are utilized. And again, all the classroom and instructional operations will continue to take place where they have for the last 10 years. As I said, we're not proposing any changes to the site plan except for the change in use, and the only relief that we are really seeking is a parking deficiency variance, which has been calculated to be 2 parking spaces, and I believe that's been confirmed by Janice Talley. And I have 3 witnesses to present this evening. My first witness, sitting to my right, is Melissa Walker, the founder and president of Jazz House Kids. And following her testimony, I have some relatively brief testimony from the project architect, Paul Sionas. And following his testimony, we'll have some testimony from our traffic engineer, Corey Chase, who will discuss the parking variance and the justification for the variance. So, having said that, I'd like to call Melissa Walker as our first witness.
Why is this before us? If the only thing is a parking variance, and this is just maybe for my clarification, why is it here if it's just a parking variance? Instead of why not go back? I just...
Because it's a permitted use. So it's really just a,
Oh, okay.
it's a parking variance.
Oh, so last time it was because of a change of use.
Right, it was they went to the Board of Adjustment because they needed a use variance.
Because of the first floor office use, this is permitted, so.
Ms. Walker?
Hello.
Do we have any exhibits that need to be pre-marked?
May I use yours?
That's,
I
don't think so.
I think
It's on? Okay, yes.
the light doesn't work.
Okay, good.
I'll get to you in just one moment.
Okay.
So I have the exhibits. A1 is the application. A1 is the application. A2 is the certification of taxes paid. A3 is the proof of publication. A4 is the affidavit of service. A5 are architectural drawings prepared by Sionas Architecture, dated May 30th, 2023. The most recent that we received, we stamped it July 25th, 2023. A6 is a survey from Lakeland Surveying, dated December 5th, 2018. A7 is the planning report, dated June 29th, 2023. A8 is the parking assessment, prepared by Dynamic Traffic, dated August 3rd, 2023. A9 is the parking report from Level G Associates dated August 17th, 2023. And A10 is the planning report from my department dated August 15th, 2023.
Okay. You ready to swear the
We're
witness?
I am ready. Wonderful, sorry.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Melissa Lynn Walker, and I'm the president and founder of Jazz House Kids.
So you've been involved with Jazz House Kids from the beginning?
You could say that.
You are the beginning.
I am the beginning.
And you're still there as president of the organization, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is Jazz House Kids a nonprofit corporation?
We are.
Okay, and is it also recognized by the IRS as a 501c3
It-
nonprofit?
It is.
Okay. All right, so I think probably most of the people in this room know what Jazz House Kids is all about, but probably not in as much detail as you do. So I'd like you to just explain to the board exactly, just talk about Jazz House Kids, the mission of the organization, the programs that, et
Sure,
cetera.
sure. Today, Jazz House Kids is in its 21st year. It was started really by me doing a performance for WBGO for kids about 23 years ago. And they asked me to do something more than just perform. Would you share this American art form of jazz with kids and families? And I decided to build a jazz house that day, and we decided that we would fill that jazz house with all the tools that are really the foundational to this great music. And that program eventually, I was asked to go into Newark Public Schools and to deliver programming, assembly programs at that time. And we went from there into doing choirs and band programs, and after a couple of years, I decided to start the nonprofit of Jazz House Kids. And those are kind of humble beginnings. I was performing largely and recording and performing internationally as a singer. But 21 years later, really, Jazz House Kids is here to make global citizens and community leaders. And we do that in 4 key ways. We provide access, we provide learning, career development, and community building. And access for us is making sure kids have access to this great American art form. It's really born of the African American struggle in America, and it speaks to resiliency, it speaks to flexibility, it speaks to community and harmony. And this music now is really beloved around the world. And by providing access means that we make sure kids can get to a jazz house, or kids can get music in their programs. So for us, we're in under-resourced school districts each and every day, Patterson, Elizabeth, Newark. Many of those programs are self-funded, and so we're going in where there may not have been a program or a fledgling program. It's delivering instruments, making sure that you can get an instrument to participate in the band. It's tuition assistance. Giving an example, just this summer, for 2 weeks this summer, Jazz House raised $148,000 to make sure 59% of the student body could have access to a summer workshop that ended up at Montclair State and ended up being the block party that maybe a few of you went to. 6,500 people went to this free program. That's the kind of access that we're about. And then the learning is just world class. I'm here with my artistic director. It happens to be our anniversary. My husband, Christian McBride. It starts from there and goes out to, we're employing about 250 artists a year that we're putting to work and teaching kids who have had no access to music to those who are going to a pre-college program. The pre-college program, I'm excited to say, has already raised about $3 million in scholarships for these young people going out into the world. That's the learning that we do. And then the career development is helping young people. And I should say that learning is a variety of programs. It's here at the Jazz House, where over 50 communities will come into that Jazz House each and every week from across New Jersey, and even some students in New York City. And they will take about 25 different classes, as well as an adult program. And then our youngest beboppers are, pre-K program. We're at the Montclair, Montclair pre-K. They're now doing the program. And then career development really happened out of realizing that our young people kind of don't leave. And that's actually been something that has been a true joy. About 23% of our faculty and staff are actually our alumni. And many of them have started as young as sixth and seventh grade, are now administrators or their faculty or their staff. And so we help young people chart a course for their future where they want to have arts as a real central part of their future, both on stage and off. And then all of that we bring together through through community building, the last pillar. And so using their talents, they can really give back to the communities where they live, and they can enrich those communities using their talents. And the biggest element of that is the Montclair Jazz Festival, but truly Jazz House Kids does about 100 performances a year all over, for Habitat for Humanity, United Way, businesses that will call upon us. Anybody will call upon us, because getting good at something usually requires practice and apprenticeship. And so, but the largest example of what we are about is the Jazz Festival that started as the final performance 14 years ago of the summer workshop. And we went to the park. I don't think I knew we needed a permit, and we just played music on a Saturday. And that festival now will reach this year and top about 25,000 people. So it is the full meaning of everything that we believe in, this art form that really can be an answer to a divisive environment and provide community, provide economic development for businesses that can level the playing field so everybody has access to come, and young people can use their talents to see that they are empowered and have the agency to make change where they live. And that really is the full body of what we do every day of the week. And I will just add, lastly, we now have a campus in Lower Manhattan. We've partnered with the Trinity Church of Wall Street, and they've asked us to set up a jazz house in New York City, and that is a fully funded program. So we have kind of, and one of the reasons that we're looking at additional space is that we've grown in size in terms of our team, but we are offering programming in New York City in a very similar format as we do here.
Okay, thank you. Where are your offices your facilities in Montclair currently located?
At 347 Bloomfield Avenue, the lower level, where we've been for 10 years, and approximately 2 years at 353 Bloomfield Avenue, and those are now a combined property.
Okay. And can you explain how those spaces are utilized?
Right. Well, they hold our team, so all of our offices, from the administrative, financial, for the development to marketing, and the arts team, of course, are at that location. The other way is through our rehearsal studios. These are rehearsal studios that allow for our daily rehearsals, small group, big band, improv, variety of different classes happen at that location. We have a multi-use space now on the top floor, which has been very helpful to allow us to do larger gatherings of young people from University, Michigan University was there working with our students on our pre-college academy on a Sunday. That's how that multi-purpose. Or we can do just have students perform, have guest artists come in and do a workshop with our students. So it is both a rehearsal space, the offices, as well as this mixed-use space that we use for Chica Power, Jazz House Kids Goes to College, or any number of programs that we have where you need to get out of a small classroom space.
When you talk about rehearsals, to me, that's part of the instructional
That's right.
curriculum?
That's right.
Classes, classrooms, and instruction all takes place within the building?
That's right. And most of those rehearsals and we call them rehearsals, you think of them as classes, that takes place in the evenings, right, after kids get out of school, and on the weekends. And that's what occurs there from a educational classroom rehearsal
Okay.
piece.
Okay. The building that you're talking about is not the application building, though. This is another, the 350 is a different building. So you're not talking about this building right now?
Not yet.
Okay,
Well,
I'm
in a
just
minute.
trying to
I
get that.
just
So this, all
wanted
this
to
instructional stuff is not,
So the board had an understanding.
is that
as to-
moving in, or is that just going to stay there? Whatever you're talking about now, is that going to stay where it is?
Stay where it is.
That's my next question.
Okay, all right, sorry.
All right, so you're seeking to, expand your operation and to occupy the building at 3A North Willow Street.
That's right.
And where is that building in relation to your current offices and space?
Well, the main entrance to the Jazz House is on the parking lot at Willow Street. So this building is 10 feet, 15 feet from the door of our building,
Of your current office?
of our current office at 347.
Okay. And assuming this application is approved and you're allowed to take occupancy of what I'll call the new building,
Right.
really renovated building, do you intend to continue to occupy the space you currently occupy in the two other buildings?
Yes, we do. We intend to have both spaces and create more of a campus-like feeling.
Okay. And do you propose any changes in the manner in which you utilize the two buildings that you're currently in?
No, we don't.
Okay. And do you anticipate that all of your instructional use, your classrooms, your rehearsals, all will continue to take place in that building, in those buildings where you
Correct.
currently are?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And by the way, I should have asked you this earlier, but just what are the ages of the student population that you service? That you.
On average, the young people are 12 to 17. As I said, we have a pre-K program, early childhood, but that usually happens on site at different schools. But our youngest beboppers are in our Louis Armstrong program, and they would be 8. But the majority of our students really fall in that space. And we'll see them all the way through graduation. But usually they come to us after a few years of playing, and so they are, 10, 11, or 12.
All right, and turning to the new building, you have an agreement with the property owner, Stephen Plofker, to occupy the entire building?
We are working on that now.
Okay, you don't have a formal lease yet? but-
We do not have a formal.
Okay. So tell the board why you wish to expand into that building and how you intend to utilize that building.
Sure. Well, we started looking at this and needing space. I mean, we've been in our current space for 10 years, and right now my senior director is working in a closet. Our head of student services is in the HVAC room. And any other sundries of things. As you see, we've grown in size, and in all seriousness, we have a team of about 25 people, and we don't have the space. And so we are working on couches, we're working at the cafe table that our students use. When music starts, I can't use my office. There's any number of things. So we really need a space to expand our offices and be able to work in an appropriate manner. That's really what first embarked upon this.
Do you anticipate any expansion of your staff or workforce as a result of this, or just have better space for them within which to function?
With the exception of just a couple of positions that we are seeking right now, part of our plan, we have no plans to expand our space. Expand our team. We actually have already expanded the team to be able to do the work that I've spoken about.
Okay. All right, so part of your intended use for this building is office space, as you've just described. And am I correct that the office use would be on the second and third floors?
Correct.
Okay. And how do you intend to utilize the first floor of the building?
Well, one of the great challenges, as you can imagine, or one of the great opportunities if you're a performing and you're a music organization, is you want to do music. And Jazz House has not had the ability to do music on site. And so we go to Trend Cafe a couple of times a year, and we multiple nights, and that's where we'll do small performances for our students. Or we're going to seek performance space elsewhere. Maybe if we can go to Montclair State University, but they're pretty busy. We bus students over to New York City, to Trinity. So we don't have a location to do any of the performances, or we don't have a location to do performances with our faculty and guest artists. And that's been something that we've struggled with for many years, and you just kind of work around it. But this particular location would allow us the opportunity to create a performance space on that first floor where we could do all kinds of different performances with our students, faculty, guest artists, and the like, in jazz. So for part of our classes, as well as, the ability to perform the music of jazz on site, which we haven't had that opportunity.
Alan, I got a question for you. The plans say ground floor, first floor, second floor, and when you started, you said all the performance stuff is going to be on the first floor because the plans are wrong, but the plans say ground floor performance space. So you refer to it as 1, 2, 3.
That's my mistake. To
Okay,
me,
so
the first floor
the first level is the ground
Is the
floor.
ground
So the
level.
plans are right. And the plans say ground floor performance space. So when you're talking about the first floor now, you're referring to the ground floor
Correct.
on our plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, my mistake.
So I thought that maybe the performance space was moving upstairs, up a level, off the ground.
No.
Okay, all right, got it.
Sorry. No.
Yeah.
Okay. And will the ground floor be used exclusively for this performance space?
Yes, it will.
Okay. Is there any intention to utilize any part of the building at 3A North Willow Street for classrooms or instructional purposes?
No, we've determined that the best use would be to keep the educational spaces, the music educational rehearsal classroom spaces, over at the current location where we are.
Okay. And would the performance space be utilized exclusively for Jazz House Kids events? In other words, is there any intention to rent that space or make it available to other nonprofits or other organizations for performances that have nothing to do with Jazz House Kids?
No, there isn't.
Okay. And I know that the floor plans for that ground floor space have not yet been finalized, but what do you anticipate as to the capacity, seating capacity, the number of people that can be accommodated in that performance space?
I think we're looking at performances on average of 50 to 75 people would be on average type of performances. The maximum that we're looking at and our goal would be, of course, we need to, I guess the code analysis needs to be finished, but we would be looking at 120 people. Max. But on average, we think our performances would be in the 50 to 75 range.
Do you know how many seats? I mean, that's the critical.
Well, that would be the number, the maximum number of seats would be, our goal would be 120 seats.
125.
And
that
this
doesn't-
is 120.
120.
And this is flexible seating. It's not theater seating, it's seating at tables.
Does that include the musicians as well?
No, that
It's
would
just the-
include the seating
just
of
the seating of-
guests, of the audience.
Thank you. And do you store instruments on site anywhere?
Well, certainly at the current location, we have lots of instruments, not enough storage, I must say. This site we would have right off of the stage would be an area for instruments and equipment. But just to be clear, to clarify, All students bring their own instrument, with the exception of the rhythm section instruments.
Yeah, so kids coming and going, being picked up or whatever would be carrying an instrument.
They carry their instruments.
Thank-
How frequent would these performances take place, if you can
Yeah,
give some idea?
of that.
It's new, but
Yeah, certainly we're thinking that, and we have no schedule developed, but we are thinking that we would be using it monthly on a weekly basis, not on a daily basis.
so you're saying perhaps once a week?
Yeah, I think it would be used, clearly concerts are scheduled on a semi-annual basis, but other usage of the building would be on a weekly basis.
And on what days or evenings do you expect these events would take place?
Well, first of all, everything happens on either evenings or weekend days. And on a weekend, if it's concerts for our kids, they might start in the afternoon and go into the evening on weekends. And if it's concerts that are with music and are non-student showcases, they would happen always on the evening. Tend to be Wednesdays, Thursdays tend to be the dates, obviously weekends as well, but it just depends on the kind of concert that we are doing. If you're doing a jam session and that's usually a weekday. If you're doing student concerts, it would be a weekend so all families could come.
And
Question for you. So will the performance space will be designed acoustically so that it contains the sound within the space, not leaking out into?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, for a number of reasons, right? It would be we work with acquisitions. How do you say that word?
acousticians?
Yes. We work with, and one of the people that is working with this right now is instrumental in working at Jazz at Lincoln Center and has worked with us in all of our current locations. So it's really important that you think about it from a sound perspective, not only to bleed out into the public, but also what it feels like sonically in the space as well. Yeah.
Janice, I don't remember, when this was at the DRC, were we talking about the performance space and was the parking allotment?
No,
That's what I
we're
thought.
gonna have, that's what I was doing some calculations here, so there's a change.
My memory was not failing me.
That's that.
No, when it came in, it was instructional space, and it was allocated differently.
Okay. And for these performances
Mhm.
that you anticipate would be perhaps once a week and during the evenings or weekend hours,
Mhm.
where would you anticipate people parking, people coming to those events? How would the parking be accommodated?
Well, currently, parking is accommodated either on-site, well, students get there in a variety of ways, including walking and buses, et cetera, but parking would be accommodated right at the location of the parking lot that is outside, or people would use the new parking lots that we have. Happy to see the one on Glenbridge Avenue right now. And that's where families go currently when they're coming over to the Jazz House, or students if they're unable to park in the lot immediately outside our doors. As well as, I will say, as well as the largesse of David Placek and allowing us to use the Lackawanna parking lot as well.
The
For
lot right now you're referring to is the one behind 353 Bloomfield Ave? Is that on North Willow? Is that
Yes, right. So that's right outside our doors.
Isn't that a paid lot, or am I?
Well, for our students and our
Students, sorry.
families, we are not charged for that.
Okay.
And then on weekends, it's underutilized during the day, so they're not charged for that either.
That's great. And how many spaces do they allot Jazz House kids?
Well, it's unlimited for our
Unlimited,
classes. Yes, they've not given us anything.
Great. And do you know how many spots they have available there?
That I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The application said something about kids are bused. Or take a van? Is
Well,
that true?
we do all of that. And
Yeah.
so, for example, students from Patterson, we paid for busing all summer long. So students come a variety of ways. If they're local, they're coming, they're walking, they're taking their bike, our parents are dropping them off. If we are trying to bridge the gap in access, as we try to do for kids from other communities, we might bus them. And usually a bus is a van, like a small van that will take a group of young people. And then a small handful drive, and then parents drop them off. So any number of ways. When we have, of course, I should say, some kids take the train, and they'll walk from Walnut Street.
Would you expect to notify parents and other expected attendees of these performances, of the availability of the public parking facilities that you
Yeah.
mentioned?
Well, I think that's really important. I mean, for us, we've been doing that for 10 years. Where should people park, or where should they drop kids off? It's really important for the safety of kids and for just the ease. We're always communicating where people should park. For the festival, we're communicating where one should park. So we're very accustomed to that, and it has kind of reduced congestion and just allowed people to kind of get to the Jazz House without great aggravation.
All right. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions from the board?
Not for this witness, but what is your back of the enveloping resulted in?
It's just in terms of the parking variance, 17 spaces.
That's what I thought you were going to say. I put the over-under at 15, so that was,
But we'll get to that, I think,
Yeah.
with our next
yeah,
witness.
that's why I was asking now.
Are there any questions of this witness from the public with respect to what she's testified this evening about? Okay, Mr. Tremblay, you
Okay.
call your next witness.
Okay?
Nice job.
Thank you so much for your time.
Stick
Thank
around
you.
up front here.
Oh, will do.
My next witness is Paul Sionas.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
My name is Paul Sionas. I'm the principal architect of Sionas Architecture, located at 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey. And I'm a licensed architect, licensed landscape architect, and licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and my licenses are all current.
Mr. Chairman, I'm offering Mr. Sionas as an expert in the field of architecture.
I'm surprised.
Well, he has several different hats, just that one tonight.
Okay, well,
Thank
we'll
you.
accept that.
Thank you.
Paul, you prepared the site plan that was presented to the zoning board in 2020 and ultimately approved by the board. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And you submitted in connection with this application 2 sheets of plans, and the second sheet is noted to be a site plan. Is the site plan the second page of your exhibit, the site plan that was approved by the board?
Yes, it
The
is.
zoning board?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to go into, intricate detail since we're not proposing any changes, but can you give the board a broad overview of the site plan approved by the zoning board 3 years ago?
Sure.
By the way, I have it on my computer if you want me to pull up the plans, or,
These plans?
I do. I don't know if it's
I don't.
easier.
Depends on how you want to talk about it. I mean,
I'm fine with looking at the
Okay.
drawings. I mean,
Well, it might be helpful if the public wants to see it.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So there were 2 pages as part of this application. The drawing that's up on the screen is labeled as SD 101, and that shows 3 floor plans of the building. And as was stated before, for some reason 3 years ago when the drawings were labeled, the floor plans were labeled, I don't remember why, but the ground floor was labeled ground floor, and the floor above it was labeled first floor, and the floor above that's labeled second floor. So we kept that nomenclature all 3 years. It's
So the
confusing.
ground floor is not the basement, it's
No,
the
ground
first
floor
floor.
is the ground
Yeah.
floor where you walk in at grade level. So in 2020, the applicant received approval to convert this building and add to it, to convert it to all office use, and he sought a use variance because this is in the C1 zone, the center district, and offices were not allowed on the ground floor. So at the time, the applicant received approval for all 3 floors of office use. And just to back up, to give some history of the property, it's an interesting property. I've known it since the 1980s. It was in pretty bad shape historically. It was known, to me, it was known as the ice house for Giblin's Liquors, which was on Bloomfield Avenue, which actually blocks the view of Bloomfield Avenue from this subject property. Sometimes about 39 years ago, the ice house closed, and a contractor purchased the property. And for 35 years, that contractor used this for his contractor offices, storage and warehouse space for his construction materials, and also vehicle storage. And then in around 2019, the current applicant purchased this and some of the adjoining properties. I'm sorry, he purchased the adjoining properties many years before that. But this was one of the last pieces that the applicant purchased. So in 2019, the applicant purchased this, hired us to prepare drawings to totally redo this building, which is kind of a exciting building. It was the original masonry building. It had some large openings from the contractor's vehicle access, but the applicant, as he does with many of his properties, made it kind of cool and interesting. So there's large openings filled with glass. He exposed all the lintels or headers above the windows. He added balconies because at the time in 2019, 2020, we were going into COVID, and the applicant testified at the time that we really need outdoor space for all these these offices. People want to be outside. So this has 2 great balconies. Or terraces, and you can see on that bottom right, which is the top floor, there are 2 terraces off of that top floor. The other thing he did was to connect this building to the buildings on Bloomfield Avenue. So if you look in the planning memo, there are some great photographs starting on page 3 of these connector pieces, and typical of the applicant, these are pretty interesting. So he connected the top of this building with a balcony and deck to a stairway that connects to the back of 2 of the buildings that front onto Bloomfield Avenue. And if you go there, it's pretty interesting. So this work has been going on. The construction's been going on since 2020. And the work is still not completed because he was waiting for the right tenant. So the last 3 years, I've heard that certain prospective tenants were interested in the building, but they were never the right tenant for the applicant. So apparently now it seems like there is the right tenant. And as we've heard from Melissa, Jazz House Kids currently rents space from the same applicant in the building next door, so 10, 15 feet away. They use that space for offices and instructional spaces, music instruction, and they're going to keep that building for music instruction and offices, but their intent is to occupy this entire building, this 3A North Willow, and as we've heard, the ground floor will be performance space. They don't know how many seats they'll have. Melissa said they'd like to have tables and chairs. They'd like to have a stage. The seating the number of seats will depend on building codes, how many plumbing fixtures we could fit into the space, whether we're sprinkling, where the exits are. So that will also limit the number of seats in the building. The building code will do that. What's shown is the ground floor as performance space, and it's 2,888 square feet. And we've looked through the zoning ordinance to find a similar permitted use in the C1 zone. And in Montclair zoning 347-80, under the C1 center zone, it lists commercial recreation facilities, which is defined as a building or group of buildings used for recreational purposes and operated as a business and open to the public for a fee, including theaters, movie theaters, museums, art galleries, and amusement centers. And also in the zone, in the ordinance, it states that this use, similar to a theater, is associated with the arts and entertainment industry and complies with the permitted uses in this zone. And as I said, that's 347-80. So in that section, it lists parking requirement of one parking space for every 200 square feet of gross floor area for this theater or arts and entertainment business. So that results, if you take the 2888 divided by 200, it comes to 14.4 stalls. There's also the conflicting part of the zoning ordinance that says you look at number of seats, one parking space for every 4 seats. The thing is, we don't know the number of seats yet. So right now, on the drawings, it showed the calculation from the commercial recreation centers. What else? If you're not familiar with the building, it's located just to the north of Bloomfield Avenue. This is an interior lot. This building is completely interior. It's not visible from North Willow Street. It's surrounded by many different uses. One in particular is the 2-story building at 18-20 Lackawanna Plaza. That's a multi-story building with residential use on the upper floors and some commercial uses on the ground floor. There's also, it adjoins the building just to the southwest that was formerly Fashion-O Restaurant. It has the new owner. Also, it's adjoined by many properties that are owned by this applicant. For example, the lot at the northeast corner of North Willow and Glenridge Avenue is now occupied by the Glen Willow apartment building that was finished in the last few months. That is 17 dwelling units, but 2 floors of indoor parking in that building. 7 North Willow is just to the north, also owned by this applicant. It spans from North Willow on the west down to Lackawanna Plaza on the east. The Phoenix building at the corner of Bloomfield Avenue and North Willow, that contains offices. I believe Mr. Trembulak's office is in that building, along with a restaurant use on the ground floor, plus the Arthur Murray Dance Studio. That was a subject of an application to this board 15, 20 years ago. The 2 parking lots, there are 2 parking lots, one on lot 18 and one on lot 17 to the northwest of this subject property. Those are also owned by the applicant. The one parking lot closest to this building is striped for 26 parking stalls, and then the lot just to the north of that is striped for also striped for 26 stalls. All of the applicant's buildings are in very good shape as he's purchased and redeveloped these in the last 25 years. What else should I mention, Alan?
Well, it's interesting that this property was approved for subdivision however many years ago. It's a landlocked parcel, right?
Correct. It's a landlocked parcel.
There's nothing on this property really other than the building.
Correct.
There's no on-site parking for 3A North Willow Street, correct?
Correct. The
Parking
only
is provided on the
Right.
adjacent lot.
That's right. The only exterior to this building is a new plaza that the applicant installed in the last 3 years. So the space between lot 3.01 and the building to the south on lot 3 was a wood deck 25, maybe 40 years ago at the back of Giblin's Liquors. This applicant removed that deck and then made a really nice masonry patio or courtyard that would be shared not only by the tenants in this building, by tenants from those buildings fronting onto Bloomfield Avenue.
Okay. And the access to this property is provided by an access easement that runs through the parking lot, is that correct?
That's correct. So there's an access easement that runs from North Willow Street all the way to Lackawanna Plaza. And that access easement is improved with a concrete sidewalk. So you could walk from, as I do sometimes, you could walk from South Willow down to Lackawanna Plaza or vice versa. You could park at Lackawanna Plaza and walk up to these buildings, or it's a shortcut sometimes for me. So that is an access easement that's in effect.
Okay. And I think I asked you this question earlier, but just to be clear, there's no proposed changes to this site plan that was approved in 2020 by the zoning board, correct?
That's correct. There are no proposed changes. And I just need to point out, as you mentioned earlier, so on the drawings, it mistakenly lists instructional space plus performance space on this ground floor. Over the last month, that has changed. Jazz House Kids requested that this ground floor be performance space, that they will keep their existing instruction space in their current facility at 347, 349 Bloomfield Avenue. And the top 2 floors will strictly be office space for Jazz House Kids.
And did you identify the square footage for the office space and the performance space?
I did not. The office, the ground floor performance space is 2,888 square feet. And then the 2 floors above that total 4,639 square feet. And those are office use for Jazz House Kids.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
And
Please.
Can you tell me what is the size of the performance space? Just read it.
The floor area is 2,888 square feet.
3,000.
Right.
And based upon the differing uses of the building, you calculated, or your plans show, your understanding as to the parking demand for the building based upon the change in use, is that right?
That's correct. So the
You
parking
wanna just
demand.
explain your calculations?
Sure. The parking demand for the 2 offices takes the total square feet of those offices, which was 4,639, and divided that by 250. So the parking for offices is required to be 1 space per 250 square feet. So the parking calculation on the cover page for that, it's 11.55 for the first floor, which is the middle floor, and then 7.0 for that upper floor, which is the second floor. So it's 18.55 parking spaces required for the office use. And then for that ground floor, we took the 2,888 square feet and divided it by 200 square feet based on the permitted uses in the zoning ordinance, showing this to be similar to a theater or arts and entertainment venue, which has a parking requirement of 1 parking space for every 200 square feet. And this was done, again, because we don't have a seating layout.
I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do here, because we've got our consultant that says it's not that, and one way or the other, if we're gonna do this, we've got to do it with a variance, but it's got to be the right variance. So what are we, it's a question for, I don't know whether it's Mr. Neese or Ms. Talley, but
We also have Mr. Giosa here too, but I think, rather than pulling it out as a commercial recreation facility, which is like a separate use, this is space within the school. So originally it was instructional performance. I think the logical way, because to determine parking is the number of seats. You know, if you say you're gonna have 120 seats, that gives you an idea of what the parking demand would be, which would be 30 spaces for that, at 1 per 4. So I think that's probably since this is performance space related to Jazz House Kids rather than an independent commercial recreation facility, I think that's probably the better way to approach it.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a parking variance. I mean, we're one way or the other, this board is
Yeah.
going to be, I mean, it's great to know what the space is, and the witnesses have done a terrific job of explaining what the space is, what the need for it is.
Right.
I just want to make sure, I mean, I don't want to create a precedent by calling this X when it's Y, and I don't think we have to. I mean, I think the point is we know what it is. I think your view, Ms. Talley, about using the number of seats makes eminent sense, and I mean, I think we probably ought to just kind of treat it as a larger variance with,
Right.
based on the number of seats, and then discuss it in that context, but.
So we do have a traffic expert who will testify next, but we did hear Melissa state that she would like 120 seats.
Right, no, and I think the bigger, I mean, great. I mean, like I said, it is what it is, and we're gonna need a variance one way or the other, and it's, like I said, it's terrific that we know what the use is, and could not have done a more, a better, clearer job of explaining the need for it. And so, I just wanna make sure that we're talking about what we're talking about, and then we know. I think the bigger question for the traffic, just so Mr. Trembulak knows, I think the bigger question is dealing with Mr. Gios's comment that we could use something a little clearer by way of a drop-off pickup plan, given what's all gonna happen, but
Well,
that's for the next witness.
I understand that, but we're not doing anything that's going to affect, there's not going to be any drop-off or pickup associated with this building. That's been taking place in the building next door for 10 years. We're not adding to that in any way. Mr. Gios's comment, I think, was based upon his thought, again, based upon the miswording on the plans, referring to this as instructional and performance-based, that there would be an intensification or an increase in the number of students attending, and there will be none. It'd be the same number, and they'll arrive and leave the same way they do currently, and there's not going to be any change in that.
But as a performance space, though, you're going to be attracting people to attend those performances.
Yeah, well, that's
It's use
part-
that you don't have going on right now.
But I agree that doesn't change the pickup and drop-off. I mean, my response was gonna be something more along the lines of, yes, but you're here, and it's a fair question, particularly given the construction that's coming in Lackawanna, and it's worth getting an answer. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna change anything, but I don't think the answer can just be, well, it's not gonna change the current use, because you're here, you're asking for something, and so
Well,
we stick our noses in.
I know.
Well, could we,
So I think either way, you've got to somehow address some intensification of the in and out access that Mr. Giosa has pointed out. Even if you're not having students come in, you may have people from the public coming in now to attend performances.
Well, that's really a parking issue, I think.
No, it's an access issue because of where the entrance is. It's not on the street. It's off of a parking lot. And you've got people coming in where they're parking their cars. For instance, the alleyway, as pointed out, maybe the alleyway needs better lighting.
And, that's public, that alleyway is owned by the town. So it does need better lighting. It needs a lot of sprucing up. It could be something much nicer.
Well, we
And,
did
you know,
repave it. So at least safe.
It needs lighting.
but-
Problem is, we don't own the walls.
And because something has been going, and again, because something's been going on for 10 or 20 years, I mean, clearly, the operation is a success, and we anticipate that it will even be more of a success. So you do want to give some consideration to the safety aspect of it.
Well, sure. And I can recall Melissa Walker for some additional testimony. I think she gave an overview of how the students.
I think,
Yeah,
and
to
yeah, I
the
don't think
site.
I think we understand.
Yeah.
I think we understand how it's going to be used, but you're intensifying the parking, you've restriped the parking lot, and so how do we make sure that it's as safe as it can be?
And also, are you having any, I mean, maybe I should have asked Ms. Walker this, but are you having any outside performers who will come and unload their truck and instruments and amplification equipment, things like that? Where do they do that, if that's going to happen? Yes, sure, I'm sorry, I should have asked you earlier.
Yeah, you should come up to the microphone so that record can capture
Well,
you.
as a jazz venue, musicians bring their instrument in. Other than the piano, they'll bring their instruments in. There's no big loading in because you will have a permanent sound system in
You
place.
will, that's basically my question. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. You see when people come to the Wellmont, they
Yeah,
have a
no,
huge
this
big
isn't the
truck and
Wellmont,
they-
no. This
Okay.
is a venue with great acoustics, good sound system in place. Musicians walk in with their instrument, and things like the drums and the piano are on site in the storage. So there's no loading in, there's no trucks. It's musicians walking in with their
Okay,
instruments.
I should point out, don't go away, Melissa, that there is a loading space shown on the plans, very close, I mean, probably as close as you can be to this building.
Correct.
Yeah. It needs to be restriped as part of the conditions of the prior approval, and it will be, to be more clearly delineated. But there is loading space there. Do you want to talk a little more about, how, your students arrive, drop off, pick up, how that's handled?
I just need clarity. Are we talking about students? Are we talking about venue? Are we talking about safety? I'm a
We're
little
talking about
confused with what-
everything that you just mentioned.
Okay, well,
Everything,
safety is really certainly a big piece for us. We work with young people. Having a well-lit alley and having it nice, I know it's paved, but it could be better. But that's really important, right? But for our families and our kids, and safety is the most important piece of it, they are coming in a variety of ways. So if you're coming from New York City, you're taking a train. If you're coming from Newark, you're taking the bus, if you're not being dropped off. Jazz House has a door on Bloomfield Avenue. Some students will come in through the Bloomfield Avenue, and then they'll be buzzed in where we have cameras. Or they're coming and they're being dropped off at Lackawanna Plaza, and they're walking through the alley.
Where do your vans drop them?
They'll drop them off on Willow Street, right outside.
They don't pull into the
They
parking lot?
don't pull into the parking lot. They usually, well, it's a couple of things. If it's a full lot, they won't pull in, but they'll usually pull in if they can. It kind of depends on what's happening there. But the van, which we don't have every day, by the way, we really actually only have it for certain groups of students coming from certain communities. So I would say our kids are driving and parking, all right, and so they're either going to park on site, or they're allowed to park in the Lackawanna parking lot, or they're going to now use the new lot, or they are using the new lot on Glen Ridge.
And the vans are not dropping off on Lackawanna, that's individual parents, correct?
Those are
Or
individual
guardians,
parents, exactly,
Okay.
because, they've just, that's how they'll, it's a real easy shot to drop them off on Lackawanna. They'll go through the lot and into the Jazz House.
And there's no actual loading zone there, right? It's all paid parking spots, correct?
Where's that?
On Lackawanna Plaza?
On Lackawanna,
Yeah.
except for in the evening, after hours or after the meters are entered.
Oh, correct. Yeah, I just meant that it's, there's not an actual loading area. It's
No.
striped parking.
And the same thing with North
Yeah.
Willow. There's no
Same thing with
loading,
North Willow.
unloading on North
Yeah.
Willow.
No,
In fact,
kids-
it's very heavily used there because there's so much activity. So
Are you saying, has it been a problem for us?
I couldn't even park my car.
I mean, as one who shared space with a great nonprofit in town, Sharon Miller, we've not had, in all honesty, in 10 years, any issue with our families getting in. With our kids and our families, no one's late, no one's having any issues. And it's something that we were well aware of when we moved into this space and where we were before. Being able to drop your kids off, parents come into the Willow, or they'll go to Lackawanna and they'll turn around and leave. Some people will park again on a weekend, our college pre-academy, they'll just park there. And on busy nights, They're using the new lot, primarily the Glen Ridge lot. It's
No, well, I
primary-
mean, clearly, it's not like we've had reports of
Yeah.
people being injured or,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I think we're more concerned about, since we're looking at the site
Yeah.
to expand the use and to do something new here, that these associated things are being handled as best
Mhm.
they can be. If there's a way to improve it, I think that's what we would like to understand.
Mhm.
Again, the property and the location and the parking lots, everything is what it is.
Yeah.
And it's and it's not the best, but again, it is what it is. And like you said, we're adding parking spaces, and if it makes sense to eliminate a parking space to allow, a safer drop-off, that's the type of thing that we would be willing to
see.
consider. And I don't really know whether that's necessary or not. I'm just throwing that out there as an example. Just trying to work with what we've got
Sure.
and doing the best that we can with it, because I don't see the dropping off as an insurmountable problem.
Yeah.
But again, just wanting to make sure that as we're looking at it, that it's being handled, everything is being handled as best
well
it
as
can be.
Yes.
Because it's evolving, and we fully expect it to be more successful than it actually is now. I know you said you don't plan on hiring people, but I'm hoping 2 years from now that you won't have that same answer, because
It's already done.
your operations are expanding.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of what
Yes,
we're
yes.
concerned about.
I just want to say, I think we feel good about where we're located because there's more access to parking, to dropping off our kids than where we've been before. And so most businesses have zero parking access.
Yeah.
This does. And so for us to be able to have kids come in the evening for a class, to come in a weekend for families or students to go and park, there are very few places where that occurs. So for us, I actually feel quite fortunate in Montclair where we are, because that's just not a reality in a lot of the locations that we would have, that would be right for the
Available.
Jazz House, yeah.
Plus you have mass transit options, too.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, let's not underestimate that. We do a lot of mass transit, right? So our kids are busing in or are taking the train as well. And so that's very important. That's why we kind of need to be accessible to public transportation. Yeah.
And I think that the parking variance is really associated with the performance space. So I think the focus should be on the times that you anticipate the parking need for that performance space. So if you
Right,
could just
evening.
reiterate, I know,
Sure.
again, when you expect to utilize that
So that would
space?
be evening performances.
And weekend, right?
And weekend largely evening performances as well. Our concerts sometimes happen in the afternoon, but by and large, they are evening performances. Evenings and weekends, and, some afternoons. But
Okay, thank you.
not during business hours, because you wouldn't have an audience.
And the frequency you said was weekly or monthly, correct?
Yeah, exactly. What this is not is a daily, venue. That is not what this is.
But then you're competing with the restaurants around the area on the weekends. And
Sure.
your busy evenings, yeah, so.
But you've got wonderful parking now in a garage that is not full on almost any night of the week, which we've learned already. I mean, we even saw during the festival over 100 spots being unused in our public parking lots. So that's not a great concern. We've already watched it under the conditions of the Montclair Jazz Festival, let alone for, our performances and the like. And again, these are taken into consideration because people have to get to places pretty easily. But you can actually see the Glenfield lot right from our door, so it's a really easy shot. Yeah.
And, Mr. Chair, the concern about drop-off pickup and making sure that's as safe and as efficient as it can be. We agree with that.
Yeah.
The problem is, we're open to suggestions, but how would we accomplish that, given the fact that, we're dealing, first of all, with a landlocked piece of property that relies upon the parking lot, which is pretty tight, and I don't think would allow for any, turnaround. Anybody could go in and drop off, but then they'd have to, maneuver, turn around to get out. It doesn't work easily. The best way would be, which is currently used, which is to utilize the alley, but there's no designated,
Drop-off area.
loading spot. The town could take care of that, but I don't know if they could make that dedicated solely to Jazz House kids. Anybody else could.
Well, how does this operate, for instance, when during the day, I guess we're in the afternoons, the lot, people pay to park in this lot?
Where we are now,
Right, the lot that's in between the buildings, or is it a pay lot at that point?
No.
No, it's just occupied by building tenants?
The office tenants.
Office tenants, okay. So when a bus or van pulls up, there's not really an issue then with completely blocking the driveway.
right. But
Parking the van there so that the kids can disembark and then walk through the parking lot.
I think that's been overinflated in terms of, we are, 99% of the kids, do not come in a van. This isn't a school bus that comes on a regular basis. Kids come by themselves, i.e. they come with their parent or they get there themselves, but there aren't buses.
Understood.
Right, I just want to make sure that's, because that would not be a true depiction of what happens at the Jazz
Right,
House.
Based on the testimony that I've heard, personally, what I'm gathering is that your kids are coming from all different angles,
communities, yeah.
basically. But given the traffic that's on North Willow,
Yeah.
You can't double park on North Willow. You barely have enough room for
Yes.
two cars to go
Yes.
down with
Yes.
the parking.
Crowded.
So if on the occasions when a van is there, if the van is able to pull over, you'd have a problem if you had a conflict with the operation of a paid
Yeah.
parking lot, of just completely blocking the driveway, blocking access
Yeah.
for however long, for the 5 minutes or whatever that
Yeah.
it takes. But if it, given the fact that we're talking about an office operation, it's not a paid venue at that time like it might be when the Wellmont is having a show
Right,
or something
right.
like that. So if a van comes up and parks, basically parallel parks, blocking the driveway to let it's out of the way of oncoming of the traffic, and, that's providing a safe means of egress for the kids to get off at the curb and then walk through the parking lot.
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things, that we need
Yes.
to understand.
Yes.
And, maybe that's the best that it can be.
Yeah.
But again, we're just trying to understand, based on what we've seen, what the experts have pointed out to us, in their reports, and understanding that, this is all one operation.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Yeah.
expanding this business, but like you say, this is going to be part of the campus,
Yeah.
as you describe
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
we
But
just want to make sure, and,
That's,
again,
I hear you.
in
The van that I,
understanding how it operates helps us,
Yeah.
make a better informed decision.
I certainly can, because I actually have pictures. Our kids, those vans, right? We're talking a cargo van, size van, right? Comes into the lot. They drive usually near the back. They drop off their kids and then they move out.
Yeah.
Because there is by our door or by somewhere in there that they back out. So I certainly do have photos of our kids coming in, even just this summer. But that's how that happens. I just want to make sure we don't have a vision of a school bus of that happening nightly, because that's just not it. They're coming.
You're not initiating school.
We are not. They're coming by themselves,
Yeah.
unless they have a sibling. That's by and large what it is, and on occasion. And I would say this summer was the first time we actually did that with students from Patterson, and we brought them in for their summer programming. But that's not the normal course of business.
Understood.
Yeah.
The other thing, Mr. Chairman, and we're going to provide some testimony on this in a couple of minutes, but I also think it's important in discussing all these issues to point out that there's a full-time parking attendant at this part, manages this lot and the adjacent lot for the Appi's Restaurant building there, as well as parking across the street, owned by Mr. Plopker. And it works because the attendants are very good, and they, help people, direct people. They see if there's a van coming
Yeah,
to
they're
drop
great.
off the kids, they'll know, where they can go, or, whether it's in the street or if there's room for them to pull in. They direct things there, and they do it very well and efficiently, and it allows for, what's otherwise a very tight parking situation, admittedly, to work. And of course, I'm there every day myself, so I see it.
Are they advised?
Yes.
Excuse me, are they advised, is the parking attendant advised if you're having a van coming? Would they know
Yes.
ahead of time?
They always do. First of all, in
Oh, they
truth,
do.
I sound like they are great.
Yeah.
And they make that area work. First of all, they're very, very nice gentlemen. But yes, they do. If we have a special guest, we'll let them know.
Okay.
So they'll greet them. If we have something happening, they'll know. I mean, again, our job is not to make it challenging for people to get to where we are. And so even though we are landlocked, it just really hasn't been an issue for the Jazz House. And I don't anticipate it being, given when we are planning to do our business. The biggest congestion is during the day when we have lots of people coming and going to the offices. But we certainly work with them. They know us. And they're just a really great team. So it has worked really well, and that's how we operate now. And that's how I think we would absolutely operate. And we're well aware when Wellmont is happening as well. Yeah.
Do you know what the hours of the parking attendants are?
We have our next witness, actually, will, I think, talk about that.
They're a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Any communication with the people who would attend the events, is that typically done with email or, because the communication with the Jazz House Kids Jazz Festival parking is very effective.
Yeah.
Do you do a similar thing for shows for the students?
Right.
Could you direct them to the Glen Ridge parking lot?
Yeah.
Somehow make sure that people are well aware, space is limited, it's a tight road, make sure you go to these locations.
Yeah. Well, that's, first of all, a good question. We do it a couple of ways. There's weekly emails that go out to our family, what's happening this week. We also use Active, a way to communicate directly with our families. So it is important that they know if something is happening and a lot isn't available. Like Sunday, the expectation that the lot is almost always open because it's during the day that we're using it. For guests going to the performance space, I think first and foremost, it would be to utilize the Glen, why can't I get that?
Glen Ridge.
Sorry, the Glen Ridge parking lot. That's where we would first and foremost tell all of our guests to use that, because we know they can park there. They can come up, of course, to the current lot in the evening and see if a spot is available for them. But that wouldn't be our first choice. Our first choice would tell them to use the new municipal parking lot. And communicate that. We would communicate that in how to get there. We would want to communicate that widely.
When the van comes in and drops off kids, the van comes into the parking lot.
Correct.
It necessarily has to back out because there's no way to turn it around in there. When the kids leave, how long are they there? And when they leave, does the van come back in? And
Comes
is that
back.
process repeated?
Yes, it doesn't stay, it comes back. The van does. And so when kids come they're usually being picked up around 8 o'clock, depending on what the class leaves, or Saturday morning. But it doesn't stay on premise.
How long are they with you?
On average, our students come anywhere from 90 minutes to about 3 hours, depending on the program, and our pre-college academy is a 6-hour program. So it just depends on the class, but it doesn't stay on site.
Tremblay, you've,
Okay, I think what I'd like to do, thank you, Melissa. Don't go too far away. I'm going to sort of depart from my prior script, and I'd like to call Kevin Costello as my next witness to talk about the parking.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, or nothing but the truth?
I do.
And would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Kevin Costello. I'm the Development Director for the applicant Preservation Partners.
Okay. You work for Stephen Plofker and his affiliated companies, correct?
Correct.
You're involved with all of the properties that we've been discussing tonight, owned by Mr. Plofker through various limited liability companies.
Correct.
Yep. And that includes, by the way, just so it's clear, the building across the street on North Willow, which was formerly the Diva Lounge.
Correct. 369 Bloomfield Avenue.
Right, okay. All right, Kevin, why don't you, I'd like you to talk about just generally how parking is handled and managed, you know, in these lots, and, you know, how the parking lots are operated and how they function.
Sure. So for about, I'd say it's probably 13, 14 years now, we've had a company that we call Montclair Parking. It's an in-house parking management company that we use to manage all of our parking lots. We've got about 35 buildings here in town, all of them with some parking. So Montclair Parking provides our parking services at all those, and so that might mean, you know, just driving to a building that doesn't is maybe, you know, like that's our new project on Grove Street. There's not a need for a full-time attendant, but I might have someone drive through and make sure everyone that's in that lot is supposed to be there. You know, the tenants aren't parking more than is in their lease. But they provide other services for us too. We utilize our lots to sell event parking for Wellmont shows. We manage some other people's properties in town. And at this particular location, because everyone knows kind of the parking situation down there, it's a number of buildings using a few different lots. We have a full-time attendant. So that attendant's there during regular business hours, Monday through Friday. And then Wednesday through Sunday, they're also there in the evenings. So Saturday and Sundays, it's all day. Friday, Saturday, Sundays, it's all day. And then like Wednesdays and Thursdays, I guess it's pretty much, I mean, they come maybe 6 o'clock, the nighttime guys come, so there might be a gap of an hour there when it's slow, but for the most part, it's all day, 5 days a week. You know, we have an attendant, and during the week, he's kind of knows who has spaces where. Like Melissa says, if anyone has something going on, hey, we try to accommodate people as much as we can, where, hey, I have a big meeting, I know I only have 4 spots, I might use 5, he'll move people around. He's got coverage for valet if he needs to get in someone's car and even say, hey, I'll let you park here. But later in the day, when a spot opens up there, I'm going to move it for you. He kind of accommodates all that. It's multiple lots around there. The 2 that are kind of the subject of this application, but across North Willow at 369, there's like a new parking garage underneath there. He manages, and then the new Glen Willow apartment building that's next door has 50 spots of structured parking. He kind of oversees that and kind of, it's the whole block's parking. Everyone kind of, our tenants know Darren, and he makes it work, you know.
Yeah, and as an example of that, if someone, say, pulls into the parking lot behind my building at 363, and that lot happens to be full at the time, will the attendant typically find another spot, perhaps in the adjacent parking
Sure.
lot or across the street or somewhere?
Sure, he could tell them, hey, you know, these are all taken right now, but right over there is a spot that's free. You can park there. He might even move it back for you, so it's next, you know, it's close to your entrance, you know, when you leave in the afternoon. Like I said, he has, you know, the ability to valet and insurance coverage for that. He does lots of things, you know. He helps the UPS guy who's dropping off packages, has got to back his truck out in North Willow. Darren's standing out there. Yeah, you're good, you're good, you're good. You know, that's why I think Melissa knows they've never really had a problem with the drop-offs because Darren's there and, the loading zone's the end, go down there, come on out, I'll help you back out or whatever. But everybody, we don't assign parking specific spaces per tenants. You get a set number in your lease and you're guaranteed that many, but we help people as much as you can. Appease is a good example. They might have 6 spaces in their lease. But on Friday and Saturday nights, even if there's a Wellmont show and we're selling parking, we're going to give them 13 or 14 spaces because that's what their business needs on Friday and Saturday. So we'll kind of allot some for them. We won't sell those spaces. The same guys that, are running the lot during the day, it's the same Montclair parking that is doing the event parking at night.
You mentioned, I think, the Glen Willow property. That's the residential building at the corner of Glenridge Avenue and North Willow that was recently completed.
Correct.
And there, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I think that application was approved by this board, but there's an extra level of parking in that building beyond what's needed to service the tenants of that building. Is that right?
Yeah, prior to the development of the residential building, we had been utilizing that as a surface lot since well before we even owned it. It's been a surface lot forever, back to when there was car dealerships in that neighborhood. That was always a surface lot. So we had kind of committed a number of those spots to our adjacent office users in different buildings. And so when we developed the residential, we still had to accommodate those office users even when the residential existed there. So even though it's a 17-unit apartment building, there's, I think, 50 or 51 parking spaces and 2 levels of structured parking. So, yeah, it's more than you need for the residential uses, but it's still utilized, during the day for our
So
office
that
tenants.
extra level of parking you can utilize for these other buildings in the neighborhood.
I think not only can we, I think
You do.
by resolution we're required to. I think there was a component of that resolution that we had to kind of make that available during the day, and that's what we do. I mean, it's part of Darren's job. Is to kind of decide who goes in there and doesn't, and he's very good at knowing, if this receptionist comes and never leaves, so she should park in this spot, this person's got to get in and out, I'll make them next to the entrance. He's kind of gets some leeway in where he assigns different people across the different lots.
And regarding the parking lot that adjoins the building that we're discussing this evening, is it fair to say that the majority of people parking in that lot are office tenants
Yes,
and their guests?
correct.
Okay, so which means that they're primarily utilized during business hours, Monday to Friday?
Yes. We have a couple of retail tenants that, might have an evening use there, but by and large, it's office tenants.
So the demand for parking is primarily during office hours for the office tenants?
Correct.
Okay. And then, are those spaces generally free at night?
Really depends on what's going on. It's
Okay.
if there's a Wellmont show, they might be, that lot might be full with, event parking other than kind of our appease people or taqueria that we accommodate. But yeah, on just a regular off night with nothing else going on, it's largely, unutilized.
Okay. I mean, you indicated a couple minutes ago that with respect to, appease on their busy nights, that you're able to, essentially reserve a greater number of spaces for them when they might have a greater demand.
Sure.
Is that something you might be able to do for Jazz House Kids if they've got a large event with maybe, 100 or 120 people coming where they know there's going to be significant parking need and it's a weekend evening?
Sure.
Would you be able to set aside a certain number of spaces and reserve them in this parking lot?
Yeah, and I think it's been a big part of the conversation. I've been involved in the lease negotiations with Jazz House. It's been a big part of the conversation is, how can we practically accommodate this and, not drive everybody crazy? And I think I've been assured the kind of scale of some of these, I know there's a goal of these kind of every once in a while larger events there, but it seems like the regular events, that's a jazz recital, is going to be 40 people, 50 people, some people, 2 parents coming together. I think we're going to be able to accommodate just because we always kind of have with other people. If we have those, people, some people are going to utilize the municipal lots, but a lot of it is our attendants and our event parking staff really communicating with tenants or us communicating with tenants and then relaying it to the event staff of, hey, there's this event going on this night, just so you know, and they might even go, I've had tenants give me a list of, I want these people to park here. We manage a lot. The Chase Bank lot over on Fullerton is not owned by us, but we manage that lot for Chase. And there was the Montclair Pride event, and Montclair Pride said, listen, I know you rent spaces, but can we have some? We donated the space, and here's a list of people we want to be there. We could get down to that granular level of, does Jazz House want 10 spots set aside for the performers, and then all the parents go over there, and we can direct them there, like, hey, that's around the corner if you're going to this event. We can kind of have that amount of communication, and we do that regularly, and it's one of the reasons we don't hire a third-party parking services company is because I think that direct line of communication is a lot simpler between tenants and the parking services guys. Is we can kind of have that level of control of our own lots.
Okay. Now, I would assume that, particularly if Jazz House Kids occupies this additional building, that they would be a fairly significant tenant, and that you would want to, assist them and accommodate them if they're having a big event where they know there's going to be a need for parking.
Of course.
You want to keep your tenant happy.
Of course.
Right.
And, you have spots guaranteed in your lease. They'll have spots, we're negotiating what that number is, but they'll have spots guaranteed. They can use those however they want to. They can use their spots for staff, that are actually in this adjacent lot, or they could decide, hey, half of them are going to be staff, but these two are just drop-off spots, for parents. If they, it's your spots to use however you, want to use them. It's just like we have yoga tenants, and they can decide, all right, all our teachers are going to go in municipal lots somewhere, but all our parking spots are for staff. You can kind of decide and tell us how you'd like to utilize the spots that you're guaranteed in your lease.
Okay. You've heard the discussion, the concerns expressed by the board with respect to perhaps having a better drop-off pickup arrangement. Given your knowledge of this site and the surrounding properties, is there, I don't know if that's something you've given any thought to, but can you conceive of any place where you might be able to put such?
Sure. So, I don't think, as far as a drop-off spot in North Willow, there's much of anything. There's an underground parking for 363 Bloomfield Avenue that has, so you can't park there. Then it's all pay parking, meter spots. So there's not a great spot on North Willow unless you pull into the lot, which is what I think, mostly what happens if people are going to just come in and out. I think the alley is a great idea in concept. I know some people within Jazz House call it Jazz Alley, and I think if that was like a theme running through the thing, I think it could be great, especially when Lackawanna becomes developed. That is gonna get used more. It looks 100% better than it did a couple of years ago. I would love to, help with lighting and stuff. The thing is, we don't own the buildings on either side of that. Our building is only a real short section in the beginning of it. We could certainly put a light on our building. It's just, the alley is, 3/4 of the block deep. So if there was some way that the township could help us with the two property owners on both sides of that, I could make it part of this, fit out for Jazz House, and we could figure it out. I'm sure they would love to find a way to, there's a mural program now. I think it could be a lot more than it is, and we could say, hey, that's the spot. I was just looking with our parking expert who's going to come up. It does almost appear on Lackawanna, there's a big gap between the 2 meter spaces right there at the alley. I don't know if that was intentional. It's not striped as loading, but they're way farther apart than the other meters. Maybe that could be a drop-off spot that's 5-minute parking or something, free or something. But I think it's a very good idea. I just don't control enough of that to kind of do much with it right at the moment.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say about parking?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it.
I think so. Okay. No further questions, but the board may have some questions.
Any questions from the board?
This gentleman who is your parking guy, how long has he been employed by you?
So the guy who's there during the week, his name is Darren. He's probably been there 3 years maybe, but Shannon, a guy named Shannon Hare runs Montclair Parking. He's been there since the beginning. He's a partner in Montclair Parking, so he's been there like 13 years, and he's always there for the event parking. So
if there's turnover, there'll be continuity of all of this?
For sure, there'll be continuity. like I said, Shannon's a partner, Montclair Parking's always gonna include him. But like I said, that's an in-house thing, you know, that's one of our companies that we operate out of our offices, which is, also shares this lot. So yeah, that's always ran out of our office.
And when, for example, when there's event parking, do the individual attendants communicate with one another? Do there walkie-talkies, phones, or whatever that keeps them in touch so that they know that there's a possibility of directing some of the parking?
There's kind of so I guess not between lots. There is kind of communication, but these lots are not expansive. You know, the lots we're talking about where they manage are kind of all within line of sight of each other. But there is kind of a meeting prior to the event starting where kind of the staff goes up. There's a manager who goes over kind of what we have going on that night. You know, there's a Wilmot show, but also, you know, Appease will tell us if they have a big party, you know, coming in. So we kind of know that. I'm sure Melissa will be telling us, you know, every time there's an event. So yeah, that's communicated to everyone kind of before the event starts, so everyone knows who's getting accommodated and who's not. And then, you know, they act as kind of just wayfinding people too. You know, people a lot of times say, I'm looking for this, or, you know, I'm pulling in here. We have the lighted wands and everything directing people around, but sometimes that's not to our own lots. That's to, no, you're looking for this restaurant and that's around the street, or the new parking deck is right up there. You know, they kind of act as wayfinding as well.
And it's not like you could engraft valet parking or have another company to valet cars in this area?
I've never done any valet. I don't think I've ever done any valet in these lots. We've done valet in Montclair. We're covered to do valet. We have valet, you know, trained staff that we've done in other locations in Montclair. We've have some event spaces where people have brought in valet companies, but it doesn't work here because you have to have a place to store cars that's within walking distance to get back. There's no way you can valet, even to Lackawanna if we had access to that lot. You can't, you'd have to run back, you know, or have 100 valet guys, which would never be cost effective. Valet only really works if you have somewhere to store vehicles that's a very close walking distance, because every guy that drops off a car has to come back on foot. So I can't see how valet would ever work here.
I have one quick question. If Jazz House Kids had an event, a large event on the same night as a Wellmont event, does this parking lot get prioritized for Jazz House Kids?
So I think the reason I brought up the Appease example is because this happens all the time where, like, we can have events. Appease has 6 spots in their lease, but I always give them more because they need it, you know what I mean? So I guess the answer is I would work with them, you know, as much as possible. It's tough to say I'm going to give up the whole lot every time they have an event, you know? But I'm sure I could give them, yeah, a portion or a section or, you know, cordon off something, you know, accommodate them as much as possible, yeah.
You don't have any numbers. How many spaces are in that lot? How many spaces do you
Probably
have?
know them better than I. They're numbered here, but.
It's 26 in each.
What's the other side? So it's 26 on one side and 24 on the other side.
I mean, between the two lots, there's 50 spaces, roughly.
Right, so on a big night, they would need 30 spaces if they have 120 people coming.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is, you know, I'm sure that can work when they really need it. It sounds like those big events are a little bit few and far between, you know what I mean? And maybe that's, you know, a night we don't need it. We also, not every Wellmont show is the same, is built the same either. It's not like every time there's a Wellmont show, we sell out the lot, you know? It's not like every Wellmont show, we charge the same amount. If there's a very youth-oriented group, less people drive, and they definitely don't want to pay for parking, you know, they'll walk blocks and blocks and blocks or whatever. So it's like every event is a little bit different.
I'm just trying to find out what, you know, this, for this use, with the parking demand for 30 spaces, are they going to be charged for it?
No, I mean, I don't charge like other tenants that have, you know,
Right.
Arthur Murray sometimes has nighttime events. We give them extra spaces. I don't charge them for it. But everyone kind of comes to us and says what they've got going on, and we accommodate the best you know, the best we can.
So I guess the question is if they need 30 spaces on the night of their, you know, twice a year when they have their big performance.
And that happened to fall on a
And
Wellmont
happen to
show
fall on
as
a
well.
Wellmont night, could they get the 30
I'm
spaces?
sure they could, yes. We could accommodate that, you know? It just seems like it's not going to happen that often. First of all, they're not that often, and then to have
Right.
them also fall on a Wellmont, I don't think it would be a big deal to accommodate, you know? there's a grand opening with a visiting artist and they really need it, sure. We work with our tenant, we want this to work for them as much as, they want it to work for themselves, so, sure.
Any other questions from the board? We've had a couple of different people testify about parking since I last asked the public if they had any questions. So if anyone has questions about parking from any of the witnesses who have testified about it so far, now's the time. I do see one person who looks like he's interested, so come forward. Yes. And identify yourself for the record, please.
Good evening.
Turn the mic on.
Good evening.
Is the light on? It just said, okay, so if the light's on, it's working.
Good evening. My name is Inder Andy Singh, and I own 18-20 Lackawanna Plaza. And I sent an email earlier today requesting for adjournment for this your final vote, because I got to know about this on Friday, and I'm trying to get together my team of professionals who can advise me on this matter. Now, I heard here there are some questions, questionable things in my mind with regard to the noise, with regard to the parking. Yeah.
This is an opportunity for you to ask questions of the witnesses who have testified about parking. If you want to make a statement about the application, that comes at a later portion of the hearing. So you'll have the opportunity to do that,
Okay.
but now is not the time to do that.
Okay, I can
You
ask
might have
some
a question
questions.
for Mr. Sionas.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. If you have a question,
Sure,
then,
Sure.
by all means.
sure. So my question would be with regard to the parking specifically. On Lackawanna Plaza, there are 1, 2 event space already there. And then there's one more, which I would be owning at some point on the front of my building. And then there are a couple of businesses over there. So in terms of the shared parking, I don't know how that's gonna work out. Already it's too tight. And so that's my question, one of them.
Well, you're talking about street parking, right?
Street parking, yeah. And my question was also with regard to, they mentioned about they have their own parking. I guess they charge $10, $15, $20 per parking.
None of the parking that we've discussed so far, unless I've misunderstood the testimony, really is involving the on-street parking. We're talking solely about what's being provided off-street.
Sure.
On-street parking is what it is, and while the applicant can ask us to consider that it might be used, they can't use it in calculating what is necessary to meet their parking requirement under the regulation. So, if you're concerned about the parking spaces on the street, they don't go into the mix in determining if the applicant is meeting the parking requirement or how much of a variance would be necessary in order for the applicant to get an approval.
Sure. So this is only with regard to the parking issue.
This is only with regard to the off-street parking
Sure.
that we've been talking about and the safety issues with drop-off and that kind of thing. That's what the testimony's been about.
Yeah, and Mr. Singh, if you have any questions about the interior space and the proposed use of the building, that's what Mr. Sionas had testified to. And I think if he has a question for that, he can ask them.
For the interior space? Yes, my building shares a common wall with the subject property on the back end, but I'm not in position right now because I'm trying to gather information and hire professional to ask questions, because I just came here to be present, and my request is that to have this adjourned for the final decision while I wait for my professionals to put together my questions.
Mr. Chairman, can you address the notice question?
Well, we provided notice, and notices went out, within the time required. Don't know when he received it, we don't have any control of that, but we submitted an affidavit of service, notices were sent out at least 10 days before. So, we complied with that, and I know I received an email from Mr. Singh today, and I thought his concern was about possible noise and vibration coming from the music to be played in the performance space. And, we can address that. There will not be any noise or vibration that would impact his building. You've got, as I understand it, 2-block walls, plus the music would be facing away from his building. And it's jazz music, it's not loud rock and roll.
There are other questions also. I received this notice on Friday. Luckily, because in 2020, when they put the original plan, I did not receive any notice, even though they said they sent it. And there's so many things happened. They meant 3rd floor, and they opened the balcony facing my property, taking away all my privacy of my building. I have 10,500 square feet of footprint plus a lot next to that. I have a mixed-use building, 2-story, 3-story, single-story, and it's composed of residential, retail, offices, and even while constructions, there has been some problems. So I don't want to spill everything here because I'm putting all my informations together.
Well, the problem is the amount of time. You're asking basically for us to defer the hearing to give you time to put your information together. And it sounds like Mr. Tremulak is going to object to that because he's saying that he provided proper notice. You said that you received notice on Friday. How did you get it? Was it in the mail? Was it delivered to your home or business? How did you receive the notice?
Certified mail in the post PO box.
It was in the mailbox at your.
No, in the post office box. There I go periodically to check my mail.
So it wasn't delivered into the post office box until Friday?
No, the upper board was periodic.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
So
when did it reach your box?
I have to check, probably the same week, around a day or 2 days before.
Mr. Tremulak, what is your return service at?
We hand delivered the certifieds to the Montclair post office on August 11th, 10 days before.
And your box is at the Montclair post office?
So, yeah.
Mr. Sin, your box is at the Montclair post office?
Yes.
So unless the post office personnel sat on it and didn't put it in your box for a few weeks.
Few weeks?
Days, the 11th, what is it? Yeah, sorry.
Friday.
Yeah.
Friday I got this.
But that's the first time that you checked your box that week? Had you checked it that's the first time, is that the first time that you checked your box since the 11th?
No.
I know the post office can be slow, but I have a hard time.
Like last time in
understanding how
2020, I
not
never got the mail, never.
I can't.
I know, but
I
I'm just giving you
can't
my
address that, but
experience.
we're trying to get an understanding of what
Sure.
happened.
Sure.
Had you
This
checked your
month.
box this week, last week prior to Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday?
I don't go there every day. I went there on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got this on Friday. There's so much information. I need time to gather my talk to my professional, gather the information, and then
But what's your concern? What's your actual concern?
many concerns.
Because the only reason they're here is a parking variance.
Right.
That's it.
And when Ms. Talley says that the only reason they're here, they meet all the requirements for the application that they're asking. The only issue with is that they don't meet the required parking, all right? Now,
in other words, they don't need our permission to have a performance space. They can have, it's a permitted use right now. It's the only reason they're here is for the parking variance.
and if you're concerned about, you said many concerns, but if what you're concerned about is the noise and the performance and the increased activity, that you can get some answers to now.
I have concern with the noise, parking, and safety. So I will, like I said, I need my professional to help me out.
Right. I understand that, but
Yes, I have a right as a citizen, as a property owner, I need to have a due process right.
You've had it, and you're not going to get, speaking for myself, you're not going to get the adjournment. So I would suggest if you've got a concern, state it now, and you can get the answers from the witnesses that are here, but the adjournment's not going to happen.
the applicant's attorney objects to it. I mean, he's well within his rights to object to it, since he provided the notice that's required under the law.
Yeah.
And you can't explain to me, you can't tell me when, you said you checked your mailbox on Friday, but you can't say that it wasn't in your mailbox before Friday. Can you? So the board may not really be inclined to adjourn this matter based on your indication that you just got notice of this, because you're not checking because it's going to a mailbox that you're not checking every day. But we would give you the opportunity to get information to address your concerns if you have legitimate concerns. If you're concerned about the noise, the architect can explain to you about how the property is set up. If you're concerned about parking, well, your building has nothing to do with the parking that we're talking about that's in the back. You're parking on Lackawanna Plaza, right? You don't have any parking that's accessed off of North Willow, right?
But it's all.
So if you're talking about parking that's on Lackawanna Plaza, none of this should be impacting, what's going on here should be impacting what's going on in Lackawanna Plaza.
So you are saying that you will not give me opportunity to have my, you're not going to give me opportunity to have me represented by a professional.
At this point, you haven't given me enough of an excuse to do that.
If I can make two comments, Mr. Chair. First of all, I think, as you've already pointed out, there's no parking impact on Lackawanna Plaza from what we're proposing. And secondly, regarding his concern about noise, there are state noise regulations that apply throughout the state which limit the amount of noise at the property line to either 60 or 65 decibels. That's a state law. So if there's any noise, emanating from this building into his building across the property line, he has a remedy.
And the municipal regulation do allow the space to be used as a performance space.
There's one wall which has opening, and it's one common wall, and needs to be properly safeguarded from the noise.
Mr. Tremulak, can your architect speak to that issue?
Just going to ask him the same question.
So as Melissa stated, they will be working with acousticians to make this space work right for their performing space. At the same time, as Mr. Tremulak stated, there are state requirements for sound levels. there is a, on the plans, there is a indentation on the north wall, if you look at the plan. And that will be infilled, and it could be infilled with, acoustical material. So, and as Mr. Trimdock stated, if the sound is loud to you, you have the right to call the town. If you feel it exceeds the sound levels that are limited by the town requirements.
The applicant is only proposing, and we only, in terms of any application, the uses that are permitted are only the uses that are allowed within the confines of the law. So there can't be excessive noise coming out. But, your building being located in a commercial space, a certain amount of noise has to be accepted, and a certain amount of noise has to be tolerated as a tenant. But the applicant is indicating that they are going to be working to try and make sure that as much as the sound stays inside the premises, I believe that was what the earlier testimony was.
And what I'm asking is that all that information has to be shared by my professional to see if there is.
Right, but we can't hold up this meeting because you didn't go to your mailbox until Friday.
So the mail, as far as this 10 days rule is concerned.
That's what the law requires.
Yes.
And if that is,
So-
if that requirement is met, then the applicant is entitled to proceed.
I'm here, you expect, I get this on Friday, and Monday I'm here, canceling everything, I'm here, and I'm trying to find informations, I didn't know anything about this, all this information, even now here, so too many additional information came, which I could not figure it out in the plan submitted. So you're saying that I cannot have any professional helping me in this process? You're saying that, this is quasi judicial, right? You're saying me that I cannot have any professional, being a property owner in Montclair, paying property tax as a citizen, I cannot have any I cannot hire a professional to represent me.
At this stage of the game, you can hire a professional to get analysis.
What
but
I'm losing
you
in terms-
can't. But what you can't do is have this hearing held up to allow you to seek out a professional and to do that at this stage because you're too late.
And the use is not part of this hearing, the use of the performance space. We're here because of parking. So that's where the focus of, that's what the board has jurisdiction over. They don't have jurisdiction over the performance space because that's a permitted use.
And if you.
I thought we are looking at parking, we are looking at safety issue, we are looking at neighboring property.
We're looking at parking.
Yes, even parking also, that shared parking, we talk about the shared parking, right?
For the traffic, for the lot that is
Yes.
accessed on
So
North
like
Willow.
the gentleman was pointing out, there is in the alleyway, there's a space so they can, their bus can park over there temporarily, and how much space they're gonna take for the other, it's already crowded, Lackawanna Plaza.
We won't be making any determination about that. If there were to be an allocation of space on Lackawanna Plaza, that would have to come from the township. We don't have jurisdiction over that. And though we might recommend that the applicant explore that, that would be another area of the municipal operation that would make that decision. And that decision wouldn't be made this evening.
Only thing I would say that as a citizen of Montclair, as a property owner, I feel I have the due process right and I need to hire a professional to represent me.
Okay.
This is what I would say. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Tremula.
Okay, our next and final witness is Corey Chase.
I have to excuse myself.
Okay.
Hello. Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name for the record and your business affiliation?
Certainly, it's Corey, C-O-R-E-Y. Last name's Chase, C-H-A-S-E. I'm a senior principal with Dynamic Traffic, located at 245 Main Street in Chester, New Jersey.
Okay, Corey, I think you've testified previously before this board or the zoning board or both. It may have been a while ago, so would you just maybe briefly just summarize your educational background and your professional qualifications and experience?
Certainly, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and 5 other states. Licenses currently in good standing. Bachelor's of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Massachusetts. Been qualified as an expert in traffic engineering before over 125 municipalities throughout the state, including both the Planning and Zoning Board in Montclair.
Okay, and your license is in good standing?
Still in good standing.
Okay. Chairman, offer him as an expert in the field of traffic engineering.
We'll accept one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Corey, were you engaged to prepare a parking assessment report in connection with this application?
We did. It was previously marked as A8.
Okay. All right. You want to go through that report, summarize it, or point out the pertinent provisions in there to the board?
Yeah, certainly. So as part of our involvement, we worked with Mr. Costello in evaluating the overall parking supply as a result of the reutilization of the subject property. Those requirements are summarized on Table 1, which is located on page 2 of our report. And again, that was previously marked A8. As Mr. Tremblak noted, the subject property was previously approved in its entirety for office space. That had an associated parking requirement of 31 parking spaces. As you heard before you this evening, we're proposing to utilize the I'll refer to it as the second and third floor as office space and utilize the first floor as performance space. That has an associated modification to the required parking. The parking required for the office space, the 4,639 square feet, would be reduced to 19 parking spaces. And then, as I understand, we've had some discussions going on with Ms. Talley as to how we calculate the parking for that performance space. As Paul had mentioned previously, we had looked at the one space per 200 square feet for performance space. Based on our interpretation, that would net you 14 parking spaces. In totality, when combined with the office space, would get you to 33 spaces, or a 2-space increase from the prior approval. I know Ms. Talley mentioned that you could also calculate it based on number of seats, which, assuming the worst-case scenario that we're currently contemplating of 120 seats, that would net you a parking requirement of 30 spaces in totality. So when you combine that with the office space on the second and third floor, that would get you 49 required parking spaces, or an 18-space increase from what was previously approved. You've heard extensive testimony from both the applicant as well as the operator of the facility as to how these events, and really what we're talking about is the event space and how those events are going to be managed. You've heard extensive testimony from both as to how these events are going to be managed. And I think one of the primary things to focus on is that the operators currently has events. So they have a method of communication. They have a process in place to get information out to those who are going to be attending these events already in place. So this isn't something that when their first event comes up, they're going to be trying new methods and new means of communication to get this message out there. They already have an established method. So, and as was mentioned by Melissa, they're already directing people to utilize the Midtown parking deck on Glen Ridge as a means of parking for their existing facility. So certainly that's going to be reinforced when there are events for these facilities. As you heard Kevin mention, they have the ability in controlling these lots and having a staff parking attendant there to allocate certain spaces depending on what's going on. So you have both the ability to use the existing public facilities, the public infrastructure that's currently within close proximity to the facility, as well as the parking that's directly on site to accommodate these events. And really, from a parking standpoint, that's the best of both worlds. You're going to have a parking lot which, when the office tenants clear out, will be slightly underutilized, be available for event space, but you also have these public parking facilities that can benefit the utilization of the township as well. And those are really put in place by the township to accommodate uses like this, and that they're going to be used to accommodate events, businesses, that are located in that downtown setting. And that's really what, the township envisioned when they build these facilities, is that they're shared amongst a group of users in the downtown setting. So, in my professional opinion, the space is perfectly located in that it is in the downtown setting. It does have some on-site parking specific to its own self, but it also has great access to a multitude of public mass transit facilities and public parking facilities that can accommodate any additional demand that would result as a result of these events, that are going to occur, as was mentioned by Melissa, typically in the weekday evenings and on weekends, when again, any parking that would be generated by the office uses would be at a minimum.
And the reduction in office space for this building would presumably lower the parking demand for office tenants during daytime hours, which is when the lots are most heavily utilized, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. As I mentioned, assuming that the entire building was, as it was previously approved, office space had a parking requirement of 31 spaces. When you're only considering the second and third floors as office, it goes down to 19 spaces, so you have a net reduction in the office parking requirement of 12 spaces.
Okay. Which would make it less congested during the daytime theoretically.
In theory, correct, yes.
Okay. And I guess you mentioned in your report the 2 parking facilities in close proximity to this property.
Yeah, as I mentioned, there are 2 public parking facilities. You have the Midtown deck and you have the South Fullerton garage, both in close proximity to this facility, which could certainly be utilized by attendees of these events.
And when you're talking about the South Fullerton garage, you're talking about the entrance to the new Wellmont parking lot, on which the entrance is actually on South Willow Street.
Correct. And my apologies. I thought the name of the parking facility was actually the South Fullerton.
It is actually the sign. I looked at it this morning and realized, because when I first read this, I thought you were referring to we have a South Fullerton, actually that would be North Fullerton parking deck, I guess. I thought you were referring to the parking deck further up Bloomfield Avenue, but you're actually referring to the parking lot that's part of the new redevelopment project on the other side of Bloomfield Avenue.
Correct, on South Willow.
Which is a half a block away.
Correct.
So, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
That's all I had for direct, Alan. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has. I don't want to belabor parking. I know we've talked about it, as I mentioned, extensively, but again, I'd be happy to answer any questions
So your
that anyone
position
has.
summarizes whether the parking deficiency is 2 spaces or 18 spaces, that deficiency is basically satisfied by the availability of public parking in close proximity.
That's correct. Again, it's my professional opinion with consideration of both the parking on lots 17 and 18 directly adjacent to the facility, which the owner of the property controls, as well as the proximity to the existing public parking facilities, that there's no detriment to the board approving this parking variance.
I just have a question for you. You're saying that these 2 parking decks are available, but do you have any idea what capacity they have, if they're full on the weekends or Friday nights? We all know they're there, but how extensively are they used? Did you look at any of that?
So unfortunately, there's no published data available by the parking authority for those decks. It's my understanding through conversations with the operator and through conversations with the applicant, based on their experience, that there is sufficient capacity to accommodate these events. And certainly, we're not talking about adding, 200 additional cars parked in these facilities.
No, I understand.
We're talking about adding 20 to 30 cars.
Yeah, it's basically hearsay what you're saying, because you don't really have any data on the availability of spaces in those 2 lots. That's all.
I would not contend that it's hearsay. I'd contend that it's based on the experience of both the applicant, who's very familiar with operations in this neighborhood specifically, as well as the operator of the existing school.
But it's a passing familiarity. They don't have actual data.
That's correct. We did
Right.
not do actual parking counts of these facilities. That's correct.
Okay.
So even in the worst case, when you need 18 spaces, my understanding from the testimony is that the performances will be happening when the offices are not occupied.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 19 spaces that are allocated to office. If you add the 19 to the 14, you have the 33, which satisfies parking at those times. I guess this is not a question. I'm just trying to figure out the time of day demand, which I think is significant. So I don't think that the offices would be fully utilizing 19 spaces if there's an evening performance when you're only allowing 14 available here. So, I mean, unless you've got daytime during the week performances, and we didn't hear that from testimony. So it satisfies me.
You have other questions from the board? Mr. Giosa, can you step up? And Mr. Giosa is level G, who has rendered a report at the board's request with respect to the parking, and you've heard the testimony, and you've heard the, I guess, bottom line conclusion. What do you have to say about that?
Well, good evening. This is a tough one in terms of the pickup drop-off. That is primarily my concern. You have those two lots, but they're both dead-end lots. You know, if there were a way to safely pull cars in, have them do pickup drop-off, and then pull out, you know, without having to back out or, you know, have an attendant, you know, stop traffic on the street or something, you know, I would feel much better about the intensification of activity here. You know, I don't know.
What about the parking? What about the parking? Do you think there'll be sufficient parking? That's the conclusion of the applicants.
I would feel much better if the applicant had some data backing up the availability of parking in the two parking decks that he's describing.
Okay, but without that data, how do you feel about it? I know you'd feel better, but what's the current level?
I've heard anecdotal indications that the area is very congested. I have not personally done any parking studies of the occupancy of the parking spaces or pickup drop-off activity in the area. I mean, if you feel that sort of study is required, you know, it would certainly you know, lend more credence to the applicant's requests.
I have a question, because the parking demand for the performance space is 30 spaces. At least that's where we came out. The parking lot that's associated with this building, and I think you presented a shared parking approach,
Right.
has 26 spaces in that one lot. So if they can commit to allowing those 26 spaces to be used on performance nights for these performances because of a true shared parking approach, wouldn't that show that it works without having to utilize the township's parking decks?
Yes.
If they have, I mean, if that's part of this application,
Right.
that parking lot, then that parking lot should be used for these performances.
Absolutely. I
Okay.
think that would be, an excellent
And that way you don't
solution.
have to do an analysis of the parking
Right.
capacity in our other parking decks, because they seem to have the capacity to meet it on site or with their existing parking resources,
Yeah,
if they can commit to it.
I agree that would be an excellent solution, yes.
So,
And would that require a more formalized agreement between the tenant and the property owner?
well, I don't think I don't know.
I would say yes, but there is no such agreement in place yet, and it could be incorporated into an
Well,
agreement.
well, I don't know that there needs to be an agreement between the property owner and the tenant. There can be an understanding with this board by the property owner and the applicant, you know, and I think, as I understand it, that they would be willing to allocate spaces in the parking lot sufficient to provide parking for the particular event. There might only be 50 people expected
Right.
for the event, in which case maybe, you know, it's 10 or 12 spaces. You know, if they've got a bigger event, well, then maybe the full lot would need to be made available.
But shouldn't this be part of the lease?
Yeah, because isn't the concern also
Well, it can be
successor
worked out.
ownership? I mean, we have had testimony tonight that is reassuring. The concern is always successors, right? And they're not necessarily always going to be the owners of that property. Shouldn't we have a lease agreement to make sure that it remains that way as long as Jazz House kids are tenants?
It looks like we're giving direction here a bit, so.
If I'm out of line, you can
No,
tell
I'm
me,
just,
but, you know.
because I do want to before we move
Yeah.
on, I'd like to comment
Well,
as well.
part of the problem, it seems, is that the applicant or a related entity has allocated spaces, not assigned, but allocated spaces in the lots to various tenants. There was testimony to that effect.
Yeah, but those are really for daytime use, you know. I mean, they're mostly office tenants, you know. And they're not dedicated spaces. They're not delineated or marked for.
Right, they're
the tenant's name on
allocated,
it.
but their leases say that they have X number of space, or the use of X number of spaces, not assigned, but the use thereof. And I think that's kind of the tree that you seem to be barking up.
You know, there's also, you know, we never even discussed this, but there's also underground parking,
Right.
which can be made available, and there's, what, maybe 12 spaces beneath the building? I should know, I parked there, but about 12 spaces there, which adds to the available parking on site.
So clearly you have the supply. We just want to make sure that on performance nights that you're meeting demand on site, the parking demand on site, rather than utilizing, you know, the township's parking facilities for those performance nights.
Well, I'd like to,
Well-
I think that, I've been holding back a little bit.
Yeah.
We had a law that was repealed last year that said, all these downtown buildings, change of use, you don't even need to be here. This has been an extraordinary event to put this
Right.
applicant through. There's so many buildings and so many uses that do not have parking. And this is a result of that law's repeal. Change of use, you wouldn't even be here. So I think it's unfair, and if we have to do this for every building like this, I think it's torture for applicants to come through. Number one. Number two, I would think that we would want to promote people to use our municipal lots so we can get some revenue. That's that's why they were built. And this is a downtown location. I mean, if you put this scrutiny on every restaurant that had a special event, downtown would be dead, because we would all be wondering about this parking that everyone's worried about, but people will get there. But that's my comment, and that's why I was totally against repealing that law that really invigorated downtown and all the changes of uses that happened since the 80s. And I think we should bring that back.
But Tony, the concern is also increased congestion. We've seen increased congestion downtown, right? So I think, part of this was because a project came across our desks that increased the use so dramatically that it caused everybody up here some pause, and that's why we repealed it. And I think we're trying to find reasonable solutions here. I mean, everybody, I think, recognizes the value of this use and, wants to continue to promote it. And I think we've come up with some pretty good solutions to some of that. And we do want to promote using those municipal lots, but maybe not at the expense of parents who are trying to come and see their kids play a jazz show. So I think we need to be, balancing the interests. And this, I think, is a reasonable discussion tonight to figure out, what's the best way to use this lot and the municipal lots if need be.
To Tony's point, it's not fair to say, well, you need to accommodate all of your parking on your property when nobody else does.
But that was in the past. But that was in the past. We're trying to make sure that moving forward, we're not being cavalier about parking policy, right? And that was the reason for the repeal of that law. Period.
The unfortunate thing for us really is that if we had came before the zoning board 3 years ago with this exact use, before that ordinance was repealed, we wouldn't have to be here tonight.
Well, that's
Right,
the
but we're
case,
just-
everybody's in that boat.
Right,
but
and we're
Yeah,
just trying,
so-
and Alan, we're trying to find a workable solution, that's all.
Okay.
And I think you're in a unique position. This board approves shared parking all the time, even if that's not permitted in our zoning ordinance. In effect, when you come in with the parking variance, and you have the resources. You have the resources and all the testimony you provided about how you operate your shared parking. I think this is the perfect case. To provide the parking close to the venue is the perfect way to respond to this use.
I think Mr. Costello wants to address that, although I don't want to interrupt Mr. Giosa. I don't think he's finished, but.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to add, Mr. Giosa?
No?
Okay, all right.
I think he said enough.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I just want to address a couple of the points. We keep saying provide parking on site, this particular the property that's the subject of this application has no parking. So we're always talking about off-site, adjacent, obviously, lots under common ownership. I'm just trying to work through, how I structure that in a lease and what that means in reality on the ground. If there's a resolution that says I need to commit those 26 spaces to this event space every time there's an event, and the majority of the events are an 8th grade recital, it might have 20 people coming to it in 8 or 9 cars, and I'm committing a 26-car lot to that. I'm now taking away those extra spaces from, I rent spaces
I
to
don't
whoever
think we-
needs them in the town. So I'm actually reducing parking in the downtown that needs parking, off-street parking, to accommodate a use that doesn't need it. I mean, we
That's a good
work
point,
with
isn't it?
tenants to make it work. And on the big events, like I said, I'm sure I will be giving them the whole lot, and we'll work that out through our lease, and I'm willing to do that. But it's just to when I don't have a schedule of how many times they're going to do this and how many people they're going to have, I'm not sure. They're guessing, how often and stuff.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
In terms of the sources that are immediate to this particular property. There's 2 lots that are basically in front of the front door.
Right.
Then there's the lot, then there's the spaces rather that are available in the new building
Correct.
at the corner, and then there are spaces that are potentially available at the building across the street. That your organization manages all
Yeah.
of those spaces. So, in underground. So, but in for those spaces, what percentage of those spaces are being used in the evening?
So, if it's a Wellmont show, like worst case scenario, it's like, I think what the parking we're normally looking at, Wellmont.
I think if there's a Wellmont show, from a practical standpoint, there's going to be a balancing.
Yeah.
They're not going to get all 30 spaces in there, and the attendees to the special event, if that event happens to occur, then, I think there'll be room in the parking deck for them. As a practical matter. Because we're talking, we're not talking 100 cars, we're talking 30 cars, okay?
Yeah.
But let's say there's not a Wellmont event, that you're parking. The spots that are in the lot that are right adjacent to the front door, and the ones that are in not the Diva Lounge, but the
The
loft
Phoenix,
building.
we call it.
Yeah.
363.
Those spaces that are allotted, those are basically daytime spaces, aren't they?
Correct.
So between those 2 lots, there's got to be 30 spaces,
Yeah.
more or less, that are probably going to be there.
Yeah, if you think about just that underground parking, the Glen Willow building, and these 2 surface lots, you're looking at 90 spots.
Yeah, I'm personally, I'm comfortable with that. I think that there'll be enough.
Sorry.
Got it.
Something
And
in
that's
that.
that. But yeah, I think between the inventory of the spaces that are there, I think there's going to be enough to accommodate these recitals that, once a month, or, even if they're once a week, they're going to be in the evening, they're going to be at off time. It sounds like between the 4 properties or 5 properties that there's going to be enough spaces to accommodate, and the 1 or 2 cars or the 10 cars, worst case scenario, that can't park there can park in the parking deck. which is, up the street.
Sure.
So
And perhaps on
I-
nights,
And I understand it's because you've got this interaction of all of these sites that are, interplaying, that it's going to be hard to ask the Plofker organizations to put in writing that we're going to guarantee that these things are going to happen. And I think in the worst case scenario, that because it's not going to be, you're not going to have, a Rolling Stones concert in this in this performance space, you'll be able to figure out a way to accommodate, and it's not going to significantly impact the inventory of available spaces for the public. That's kind of the way it seems to me.
Doesn't the Wellmont concert start later? This might even be over by the time Wellmont has an event.
It might be, and like you said, but we've got restaurants going on. I mean, there's uses going on, but again, I think with the unique inventory, and yes, it is a concern that this isn't going to last forever because Mr. Plofker is not going to own these properties forever, But again, it's really a small venue kind of thing. I don't think that given the good work that's being done by the organization, that we should look at that and not try and work with them to do it. If the worst case scenario comes, I'm sure the town, because of the work that they're doing for the community, the town can find some other way to accommodate, the parking needs if it becomes that much of an issue in the future, Well, Mr. Tremulak hasn't finished, putting in his case officially,
Pretty much have.
But, I mean, we've talked a bit about this, and, there's a point to talking it, to fleshing it all out, to getting all these concerns out there, to consider it. But this is how, after hearing everything, this is kind of how it's filtering down to me, from my standpoint. So how about we do this? Are there any members of the public that want to be heard on this application? Okay.
Hi, I'm Yai Packard. I'm a jazz fan. I'm a jazz house fan. I'm also president of the Montclair Center Bid, which means that our current offices are on Lackawanna Plaza, are a block away. But we used to be at 7 North Willow, directly across the parking lot from where Jazz House is now. And I just want to let you know that the parking attendants have always been, I'm sure there are different ones now than there used to be when we were there 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but they've always been terrific about managing everybody that wants to get in and out of those lots. And if there's not room in those lots, they've directed people to where they could go to find parking. And luckily, there's now a parking deck just around the corner, so it's pretty easy. They don't have to say, you got to take this right, 2 lefts, park there. It's very easy to direct them to the right spot. But I'm a huge fan. I'm so excited the space is going to open up for them. It's going to do great things for their kids. I'm also a mom of a very enthusiastic ex-student. And I can tell you that if there's anybody that keeps a smooth process going of pickup, drop-off, and of decorum when getting into and out of their student performances, it's Jazz House kids. They do a super, super job. That's all I have to say. Good night.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Tremulak, you submit?
Yeah, the only other thing we have no further witnesses. I just wanted to mention, because Janice correctly points out in her memo, that there are a number of conditions from the prior zoning board approval which have not been met. We fully intend to, we have to comply with those. And of course, what normally happens as the building is being completed and this building is not yet completed, the applicant would then typically, take care of these conditions. I can tell you that I've already prepared a deed merging the properties, which Mr. Plofker will sign when he returns from vacation. I've prepared a easement relocation agreement, which was a requirement of approval, which again, he will sign when he's back from vacation. There's requirements for some restriping, which will be done, and requirements relating to the trash enclosure. All of those conditions will be complied with. They have to be complied with, prior to the issuance of a C of O for this new space. So.
Okay.
So the
Still being
bollards were repaired. We got the wrong covers for them, but we ordered new covers, so they've been straightened out. Now they just need the covers for them. Those are on order, and the restriping was done this past week. We just had to black out certain spaces that overlapped the right-of-way. So we took care of those 2 items, or almost 2. But yes, we're aware that all the conditions are, still need to be met for the original application.
So with that note, I would submit.
All right. So the only other thing that I would like to mention, before I make a motion that we approve this, is by way of condition, I think that the applicant should commit to making all efforts to make sure that there's no negative noise impact, because we have residential units around, we have commercial units around.
Sure.
I'm sure, the applicant has testified that they are employing experts to the sound. So have the experts be sensitive to the neighbors. And we have the requirements that Mr. Mr. Tremulak just referenced with respect to the prior application. I would also add that the applicant should make sure that there's adequate lighting around at least the entrance to the alleyway. I know doing the whole alleyway, that's a matter that you have to pursue with the town, but to the extent that you can make sure that there's enough light shining down, from whatever buildings that you are currently occupying, sounds reasonable to me.
Sure.
And, we'll add to the people who, the students and the parents who are traveling there for instruction and for performances. And, insofar as the parking variance goes, I am in line with what Janice has stated about calculating the parking variance at the larger number. I think that's the realistic number to be used, considering, a worst case scenario. These are the amounts of seats that could be put in there. And I'm sure that you'll have to be turning people away from your performances. So, Art?
One more. The space will not be rented out for non-Jazz House kids' activities, is one that I picked up.
Okay.
Would you like to ask a question on that?
No.
No, it's just that as a commitment that it's just going to be used for Jazz House Kid business and performances and related performances only, that it's not going to be rented out to third parties to hold performances there,
What if
So-
it was jazz-related third parties?
As long as it's in connection with the Jazz House operations. I know you mentioned about having guest artists, and I don't think that what we're talking about is excluding having guest artists
Yeah.
or something, that it's, reasonably in relationship to the business of what the Jazz House kids are doing in promoting the arts and promoting, and
What if
like
they
I
were to
said-
do, I guess, rent it out to an art gallery for a fundraiser? If it's a fundraiser for them, is that different than a jazz? I'm just trying to think of, they might commit to it more easily than I can, but I just,
A fundraiser for a different organization?
I would like to understand what that is. I mean, right now, we use other organizations that allow us to, Vanguard allows, you can go there and use their space to utilize it.
Do you rent it from them?
I would be in an onerous situation like that. I'm just saying, how we have existed for 10 years is by our ability to work with other organizations who let us use their space.
other nonprofits or for-profits, or does it make a
No, but
difference?
like, you know, MSU, the Vanguard Theater, for example, you know, I guess what I'm saying is, we use their space, why would we be put in a position where we cannot?
I think it's because you
allow others-
testified the fact that it would be,
That's the only reason
Yeah, that
I
was the
brought it
reason.
up as a
If you want to
condition.
now make it a condition, I am saying our intention isn't that we have a space that we're, you know, utilizing for, but as a condition of our usage, why would you limit us in a manner that other similar nonprofits aren't into?
Not my intent. I just
Yes.
gleaned this from a question that I think was asked of you,
Yes.
and
It's
you
not our-
answered the
I
question.
guess what I'm saying is, it's not our intent in usual course of business, but in terms of making it a stipulation here is what I'm asking. is why
And I understand your concern. That's,
Yeah.
I'll leave it up to the board how you want to address it, if at all.
I mean, we're not going into business with another organization to do any performances or of the like, but I'm wondering why we would make that a stipulation for what we cannot do.
Well, the reason why we would make it a stipulation, that if we would want to make sure that we're not getting a more intense use of that facility than what you've described to us, okay? And you described to us basically a very limited Jazz House Kid operational kind of use to it with performance in relation, and possibly, you know, guest performances and things of that nature. Again, limited exposure. And we're looking at it from the standpoint that, well, what you said, there might be performances there where we would need extra parking and there would be extra traffic maybe once a week or maybe once a month, something like that. But if there was a more steady stream, that's a more intensive use of the property, a different traffic flow.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we would need to take that into consideration.
I think what I said is that we would use it on a monthly.
actually, we can't, can you speak into the microphone? Because we're not
So
getting.
that we can't catch all of this.
Yeah.
I want to be clear here, because because I don't need a property that I can't use, okay? What I said is, this is not a daily jazz venue. We are not opening up the Vanguard. But we do anticipate using it on a monthly and weekly basis for performance venues. What I would like to not see is us limit our ability by strict rules. We're not trying to open up a business in conjunction with someone, but I will tell you, we have utilized other people's spaces to do the very thing that we're trying to do here. And so that's what I'm really trying to say. So by going to other nonprofit spaces is exactly how Jazz House has been able to accommodate.
And I don't think that there's a problem, I don't think that we have a problem with that type of, you know, sharing among nonprofits.
Yeah, could we say Jazz House and partner organizations? Like, I understand the board doesn't want her to put it on LoopNet as like an event space.
Right,
And
I
that's
think
not the
that's-
intent, and I'm sure we
that's-
can limit that, we'd have to work on the language. but-
Right, and as, you know, as long as we're, you know, you're not anticipating a more intensified use than what you're describing to us. So if you may not be having a performance with your Jazz House group performers, but you may be hosting another organization to have a performance in your venue for that week or something like that. You know, I think that's fine. We just want to make sure, again, that we're not creating a more intensive use than what we're understanding.
I'm sure we could come up with language that satisfies everybody.
Well, Mr. Tremblack and I seem to be able to work out some language.
Okay. All right. And we have any other standard requirements, conditions?
The usual, and I think, Mr. Tremblack, you're aware of the usual conditions that exist in a resolution from this board.
Okay. So with that, that's the motion, that we approve the application.
Second.
Ms. Willis, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, board,
Thank you
very
very
much,
much.
Chairman Nguyen.
Good luck.
My concern is when they take over the Wellmont.
Yeah, I do too. I did. And I'm a fan.
Excuse me, we have another item on our agenda.
Richard wanted to vote to pass it and leave before waste a lot of time.
We still have another item on our agenda.
We do have, yes. So we do have a couple of more items on our agenda before we adjourn this evening.
So, if you guys,
Hello, everybody, you gotta go. We have another item.
we still have work to do.
Take that jazz out of here.
So, so the next item on our agenda is a referral from the council on a proposed amendment to the Montclair Center Gateway Phase 1 redevelopment plan. And as you probably heard and read in my short memo here, the proposal is to convert all, except for the affordable units, to short-term rentals. So that would be 36 short-term rentals that they plan to have that operated through the hotel, basically corporate rentals. And right now, short-term rentals are a permitted use, not necessarily in the redevelopment plan, but in Montclair, we don't prohibit them.
Mhm.
What we did in this proposal is we added a requirement that ensures that they pay the hotel occupancy tax for those 36 short-term rentals and get the additional cash inflow if the council permits it.
Janice, just to be clear, they can convert those to short-term rentals by right?
They can,
By right, okay.
because we have
Since
no
we permit it.
prohibition against it.
Yeah,
So
okay.
why are they coming here?
Because
why
their-
did they come to
Their
council?
client
Yeah,
doesn't want to invest in these short-term rentals unless it's
It's like
clearly a
crystal clear.
permitted use in the redevelopment plan, and
Yeah.
they're willing, again, to pay the hotel occupancy tax.
okay. So I
What's
have,
the definition of a short-term rental?
Less than 30 days.
So
I-
you
I-
can stay there for one night?
Yeah, it's anything that's less than 30 days.
so it's like a hotel?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's
is
a
that-
long, you would get a rental, a corporate rate, and it wouldn't be, theoretically, it would be more cost efficient to do that than to rent night by night at a hotel.
Yeah, they have them at, like, the Bay Street area also. My wife and I had to use them once we did a renovation, had nowhere to go. And it was a better rate than staying in a hotel.
So you're saying right now, anywhere in town, they could do this anyway?
Yeah. Yes.
Airbnbs are
Yes.
permitted.
There's like 1,000 listings on Airbnb.
Well, I don't
For
think there's
Montclair.
there's not 1,000.
Well, maybe they're not all, but it says, if I Google Montclair
Yeah,
Airbnb.
no, there's only about maybe 150 the last time I checked.
Oh,
Legitimate
Rest of
ones.
it's like
Recently.
Bloomfield,
Yeah, maybe
Cedar Grove.
Bloomfield, or like, yeah. So I have a question, though, about this.
Yeah.
First of all, once again, it's a procedural question. Shouldn't this have gone to the redevelopment subcommittee before, just like Lackawanna Plaza? This is a change to the redevelopment plan. Shouldn't the redevelopment subcommittee have
Well,
looked at this
sometimes
and gotten back to you?
we don't have the time. By the
Well, we
time I got,
did, well,
by the time I got the referral, which was August 4th, from the.
oh, you just got it August 4th?
That's when the clerk sent it to me, yes.
Okay, okay, thank you, I didn't realize that, yeah.
Yeah, so.
And so we didn't have any meetings until this one, so that's
Right.
correct, yeah. Okay, and the other thing is, aren't they kind of doing this piecemeal? Shouldn't the council be looking at this overall, what's going on in town, rather than just plucking out
You
this
know,
one
I've
particular property?
I've been working on it
Yeah,
over the past couple of years.
Right.
The council was not interested when I broached it to them a year ago. It was June 2022.
yeah,
But I think they are now. And I know the Housing Commission is setting up a
Okay.
subcommittee on short-term rentals. They're going to draft an ordinance, a comprehensive ordinance for the council. I don't know if the council will adopt it, but
Yeah.
there's a groundswell, again, moving in that direction.
Okay.
Just to, and I know the Housing Commission is drafting a resolution to the council on this, suggesting that the redevelopment plan increase the affordable housing set aside from 10% to 20% if they're going to permit short-term
in
rentals.
this plan, in this particular site, specific to this building?
That's what the
Yes.
Housing Commission's, I'm
Wow.
just letting you know.
Yeah.
So, Jan, I think, would that be for all sites or just for this?
Just for this one.
Just for this specific
Because right
one?
now, it's only 10%.
Right.
Yes, yes.
So, We'll see what the council
That
does.
ain't happening.
This is really changing it to a hotel. I mean, it's a fundamental, because it's 100%, it really becomes a hotel. And I don't recall, I mean, so now you've got 20% of the families living in a hotel. 20% of the affordable families who are renting there are living in a hotel. So they just have to absorb that. They're not living in with other people that also rent there and have a long-term interest in the property.
Yep.
There's a change of use.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't say just allowing short-term rentals, because you would allow short-term rentals maybe 10% or 15%, but this is really converting it to a hotel. So it's a
Exactly. I
little
think
bit
they're
subtle.
I think they, because it's right next to the hotel, it
Well,
will be
yeah,
managed by the hotel. So that's correct. It'll be basically like an extended stay hotel.
Does that
corporate
change the
rental.
parking requirement, or does it
No.
matter? No,
It doesn't matter, no.
Okay.
I think it's fine.
It's all the same ownership. Both this building and the hotel, it's all the same.
I don't know. I don't believe that there's, I don't believe that, I think there might be different LLCs, but they have a relationship.
This
Yeah,
is a
as
Brian
long as
Stoller
As long
project.
as one.
As
Yes,
was
and
the
Brian
hotel,
Stoller,
yeah.
Brian Stoller's,
Then that's
I don't know if it's the same
what
exact
opportunity.
LLC, but he's part of both.
Are you saying then that any building that is built from here out could also be?
No, this change is only to the property at this, on this block and lot.
No, but can any property decide that they're going to be all long-term rentals?
We don't prohibit it. We have nothing in our ordinance now that prohibits it. That's the strange thing.
Yeah.
We don't have a minimum term for a rental. So,
That's
Yeah.
because most
Wow.
people nobody really thinks about people coming in and renting short-term. They think about them renting at least a year, or, or staying,
right.
you know.
Except that there are a couple in
But-
my neighborhood, and, it doesn't bother me, but there's one particular house that people hate the fact that this is an Airbnb, because people come, they party, they don't, they throw garbage around, they're noisy, there's no respect for the neighbors, so it can be problematic, which is why I think they need to take, this has to have public hearings, not this, but, in general, the ordinance should be looked at and have community
Right.
involvement and see what the community says. Maybe,
Right.
I feel hypocritical because I love to rent an Airbnb when I travel, but, maybe shouldn't be in really residential areas like my neighborhood, for example.
Well, I think
don't
that
know.
if they're done right, I mean,
Wait,
I don't mean,
that's
no,
really
My
sounds-
type of my type
my
of
backyard.
neighborhood. I don't mean my neighborhood particularly, but.
So is there a master plan issue at all, or is this, I guess,
it's hard to say. I mean, they're still providing the affordable housing on site. I think you're right. With the corporate long-term rentals, I think it will operate akin to a hotel, which is why we'll get the hotel occupancy tax. Does it make sense, right next to the MC Hotel on Orange Road? Maybe an argument can be made because of its location. At this it may not apply to someplace else, but because of this facility at this location, between a parking deck and a hotel, maybe it makes sense.
And shared management, same thing, right?
Yeah, so I can't tell you if that's consistent with the master plan, or if you feel comfortable with it, but that's why we're here.
Well, I think the main concern is the lack of limitation as to how often and how many can be, how many can be converted. And right now, you're saying there's no limit.
Well, in what's before you tonight is the 36 units in this particular location. The short-term rental issue, in terms of zoning, is a much bigger issue, which if the zone, I'm
There's
working
no
with the
zoning
Housing
restrictions.
Commission on an ordinance, I can work with the zoning subcommittee on an ordinance for short-term rentals, but that's down the road. What you have tonight is this particular location.
If you're in a one-family neighborhood, can you have short-term rentals for your your house?
Yes, you can. You can have an
It's not res-
Airbnb.
It's currently not restricted,
Yeah.
so that's,
And would the town then want to implement a hotel tax on the one-family house?
No, you issue a motel a hotel occupancy tax on the Airbnb.
Yeah, on that particular property. It should. Fair is
But they
fair.
don't do that.
Is there any issue
I don't think that people do that.
just doing the hotel tax
town
on
doesn't
this
do it now.
specific
But they could.
facility of Airbnbs? No? You can,
No,
you
we-
can just pick and choose Airbnbs? I mean, isn't
No,
that
it's-
kind of,
Because we
right?
are
Isn't
regulating.
there a issue? Sorry, go ahead, Janice. I
No,
didn't
this
mean
is
to
a
cut you off.
redevelopment
Yeah.
plan, so we can.
Oh, it's a
we-
redevelopment
yeah, it's a
plan. Oh,
redevelopment
right,
plan.
right. Okay,
So we
so it's
can-
not like we're picking out individuals with, and then targeting them.
And
for
honestly,
a
it's the
tax.
same thing in Lackawanna
Yeah.
Plaza, because the short-term rentals there, you have the same provision, that if it's permitted, that they have to pay the hotel occupancy tax. It's clearly stated in our code. We already have the hotel occupancy tax, but we have the ability to enforce it
Right,
with
okay.
these two projects.
So they're not being singled out, it's part of the plan, the
Right.
redevelopment plan, where you can do anything you want.
Right.
Okay.
And what is the relationship between this and the new rent control law?
Nothing.
It seems to me like it's.
No, the
it's
rent
something-
control law does not apply,
It
because
doesn't
it's a
apply.
brand-new building.
Yeah, because you're going to.
Well, no, not in this building, but you were
saying
saying that if you own a property and you're in a one-family neighborhood and you have a house that you could,
That's a bigger issue that I'm not ready to address, short-term rentals and rent control and
yeah, and
throughout the
if you're in
township, that's a much
if you
bigger
have an
issue.
apartment building and you decide that you want to turn it into what, it seems to me that all of this coming at this time is a curious kind of a development.
I think the town's trying to raise some revenue.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting
Yeah.
development at this point in our history as a town.
Well, that's why I said I think the whole issue should be studied
Yeah,
further.
it seems to me that
But
it's.
this in and of itself, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah, but this particular building may make more sense
Right.
than as a rule that anybody can turn their property into a short-term, they'll call it, hotel.
So if from what I'm hearing from you is that it's the proposed short-term rentals at this particular location, in this redevelopment plan, in this situation, seems appropriate, but you highly recommend that the township come up with a broader policy and ordinance regarding short-term rentals.
It highlights the need for it.
To
Yes.
study the issue, really. We
Yeah.
don't know whether or not.
I'm not so
we
sure
agree.
I would recommend that.
Well,
The history of this.
Well, I guess, we can
Doesn't always come
acknowledge
up
the
with the
fact that
best
right
answers
now,
to
there's no
questions.
prohibition against there's no regulation for
Okay.
short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And
But
really-
Carol, you make a good point.
Yeah.
If rent control applies to a three-family house, for example, if the owner doesn't live there, and they want to try to make more money, well, maybe I'll turn each of the units into an Airbnb, and I'm not subject to any rent control, I can charge what I want.
But there's nothing in the landlord-tenant law
Mhm.
that allows you to evict somebody
No, no.
to run an Airbnb.
Yeah,
It's for three-family houses like that, it's
Yeah.
not, it wouldn't be easy to do that.
yeah,
If a tenant left,
yeah, then you.
they might be able
right.
to do it, but then you're trading potential short-term income for long-term
Yeah,
income, and that's a
yeah.
whole nother.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's a
whether-
financial
so-
analysis, but anyway.
I just divided 36 units into 3 million, 7,000 a month. So there's some incentive to do it if they keep full occupancy,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's like twice as much.
even if occupancy is 75% or so. Well, if they don't, okay, so they don't need this to do it, but they want it anyway, because if they can do it without having this change, does this make it permanent for this location, I guess, unless this redevelopment plan is all, okay? So they
You
just
know
want
what
the
it does?
surety.
They can do it anyway, because again, we don't, in the redevelopment plan right now, we don't determine occupancy and the tenure of occupancy, but they want to partner with Marriott to operate this, and Marriott won't commit to creating these long-term, these corporate rentals unless it's explicitly stated in the redevelopment plan. Because I think there's a significant investment. They have to buy and all the furniture and furnish all those apartments.
But the
So-
Marriott, they're not required to participate in the building that's next to them. That's entirely operational.
They're not required, no.
So
It's
they
just-
wouldn't be providing the furniture or doing anything.
I think that's, in order,
They're going
that's,
to be providing, they're going to be providing it for the short-term rental.
Oh, they're going to, that's the
Right,
agreement.
that's part of the
Okay.
partnership.
they're gonna be furnished, and they
Right.
have to, so they have to invest in the design of those units and the furnishing of those units, and it's gonna be essentially corporate rentals. And so they wanna make sure, before they commit that money, I think they wanna make sure that it's permitted. That's what my understanding is. And in the end, we also get the hotel occupancy tax.
I see it for that unit. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about giving that kind of boost to the whole town of
I think
Montclair
you're
as a
correct.
policy. And I would rather not delegate it to somebody else to look at. I think that if we're talking about a master plan, that it's something that we want to look at.
You don't even
I-
have, I think we don't even need to do it.
I'm not
as-
saying that we have to, but I do not feel that it's the best interest of where things might head if we just suggest to the town that they ought to take up this problem.
Strongly suggest. Yeah,
Right.
think we
I
should.
don't
Perhaps-
think that's
Yeah.
what we want to do with it. I don't think we
Perhaps
want to
the
make that
zoning subcommittee
recommendation.
could work with the housing subcommittee, who's done a lot of research on this, and work
Yeah.
together to come up with a joint proposed ordinance.
Makes more sense than recommending that somebody else
Yeah.
do that for us.
Yeah. Okay?
Yeah. I'm on the zoning committee, I see, or you. And we're on the redevelopment committee, so sounds like more work.
If you don't want, then
No, I'm
you
just
could,
saying.
if you don't
That's
want
a
to.
good idea.
Okay, is there, I guess, a motion?
So moved.
Somebody make the, that's your motion?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Okay. I think we have some bills, too.
Yeah, we have to pay Art, right? No?
Bill, yeah, his bills came in
And we've
too
got
late.
the official referral for the Lackawanna.
The Lackawanna Plaza will be at a to-be-scheduled September 18th planning board meeting.
And it will go to the subcommittee in the meantime.
Yeah.
And our role in this is just to look at it as it's revised and to comment again,
Right.
basically.
Are you satisfied with the
Right.
changes? And is the revised
And
plan?
will we ever get a copy of it that is redlined so that we can not have to
Keith did
figure out
that.
every
Keith
single?
did a.
I couldn't use it. My old-fashioned skills were not up to it, neither was my old-fashioned computer to do that.
Yeah.
I did try to work with Keith's document.
I could print it if you want, Keith's
If I
version.
could
Can you
see
send me that?
where
I-
the changes are.
I had trouble opening it as well.
Oh.
Yeah. It opened and then it crashed. So
Yeah,
it was- yeah.
I'm really happy that I'm not the only.
No, it
one who has
it crashed on my
this.
computer too, so yeah. It opened and then I couldn't scroll
Yeah.
beyond a few pages.
Too much to go
through Yeah.
it line
PDF.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It's a lot to go
Yeah.
through line by line. It's too much.
Yeah. You're right, you're not.
So are you going to send us something, Janice? A red line version, or you going
I guess I'll print it for you.
Okay.
Because Keith already did it, but if you can't open it, then I'll print it for you. Okay?
So the subcommittee has to start working on that. So
Right.
as soon as you can, thank you.
Motion to pay bills?
Yeah. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
For 2 parking spots.
It ended up being like